Welcome to the Racers Roundtable, a podcast sponsored by the Eastern Museum of Motor Racing, where history meets horsepower and legends live on. Each episode brings together voices from across the motorsports world, from grassroots heroes to seasoned veterans, as they share stories, insights, and behind-the-scenes tales that shaped their racing journeys. Whether you're a diehard fan of dirt tracks, drag strips, or open-wheel icons, the Racers Roundtable is your seat at the table for candid conversations and timeless memories from those who lived it. Strap in tight because it's time to talk racing history one lap at a time.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Eastern Museum of Motor Racing. We're going to get started. My name is Allison Kreitzer and I'm the Executive Director here at the museum. We're so thrilled to have Jimmy Spencer here with us today. I know we're going to have a very exciting roundtable. Thank you again for coming. If you want to know more about our events, you can always check us out on the website, emmr.org. And I'm so thrilled to have Dave Hare here today to be our MC, so I'll turn it over to him. Please give Dave and Jimmy a big round of applause.
Thank you, Allison. And we certainly appreciate the fine work Allison, as our executive director, and her staff are doing here at the Eastern Museum of Motor Racing. And once again, it is primarily a staff of volunteers that give their time and efforts and heart to make this facility what it is. Today's guest won his first late model race at Port Royal Speedway in 1976. He is a multi-time NASCAR modified champion, spent 2 decades competing in NASCAR's top divisions, where he is one of 41 drivers to win a race in Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series competition. He would eventually forge a career as a NASCAR media darling, and of course, he is the founder of the Berwick School of Etiquette, which rose to prominence following the enrollment of Mr. Kurt Busch. Please welcome to the Eastern Museum of Motor Racing, the pride of Berwick, Pennsylvania, Mr. Excitement, Jimmy Spencer.
Is it working? Thanks, everybody.
Mr. Paxton, I see you fooling with the microphone over there. Is there something?
Don't give him a mic.
I'm sorry, but we're there.
He knows
Spencer,
too much stuff.
Spencer, just shut up a little bit. Once they heard Spencer was coming, we've got a lot of people that he competed with. Big Slim was back here, and the Renninger family's back here. I'm sorry, Butch can't be with us. I invited Charlie Weirman, but he said this building's not big enough for a Spencer and a Weirman. So you take it from there.
You know, growing up, I wanted to run sprint cars, and I loved Bobby Allen and Lynn Paxton. And I would watch those guys race, and then Bob Weichert with the sprint. And I wanted to race a sprint car. I told Paxton. And one night I was at Sealands Grove, first year of dirt racing, and Paxton challenged me. I got in the sprint car down there, that ended my career in dirt racing. True story. He won at Port Royal, and I won at Port Royal. I passed Jim Nave on the last corner of the last lap, never touched him. And Jim Nave and his wife were fantastic people from near Bedford. Somebody threw a beer bottle. A lot of people threw stuff that night, and they hit my wife, my girlfriend, in the head. And I said, listen, you son of a bitches, you'll never see me in a dirt car again. And I never got back in a dirt car. I said that was it, because my dad had a reputation, but my dad won lots and lots of races, and I wanted to race sprint cars, and I decided I was going to go asphalt racing. That set my career in that way, but I definitely wanted to go IndyCar racing. I know I wasn't as big at the time, and I met A.J. Foyt, became friends with him, Mario Andretti, and fortunately enough, in my career, I even became bigger friends with them as we became Cup drivers. And
Boy, am I glad you went NASCAR.
We had a lot of good friends. Old Hogan used to bust his butt all the time. Hogan Fogarty. He's a prankster, just so you guys know that. Paxton is a piece of work. I love Lynn. I got it with Schrader, and oh man, we talk about Paxton all the time. And I got to tell you something, guys. First time here, won't be my last. Absolutely incredible what you guys have done here. The motors, the friggin' history. Stevie Smith. I go down the list. Slim Double Best, right up there he is. That's the car. I tried to pass Slim on the outside at Lincoln. I got up on the top and I said, I got enough room. I was a rookie, first year. And bam, I hit the wall. My brother said, damn, Slim put you in the wall. I said, no, he didn't. I said, he gave me enough room. I was dumb enough to run into the wall. But I was telling Slim the story. Slim's good to see you. The Renningers, oh, Jesus mighty. I got to tell you a quick story about Butch. Me and Butch, we were racing at Clearfield. Sunday evening race, it was dark. And I can't recall the car, but there was a pretty bad wreck, and Butch and I were running together. We got involved in it. The motor hit the roof of my car, and Butch caught the rear end. The whole freaking car busted apart. And me and Butch are there, and we're looking, and we said, Butch, I think I killed this son of a bitch. And that was Butch. Finally, he got out of the rest of his car. You remember Michael Waltrip's incident at Bristol? I don't know, it was Blackie Watt's car. It was a convertible, but it was incredible. You meet people in your lifetime. Paxton's one of them. Barry Kleindienst, a lot more calmer. But Butch is a guy you never forgot. And I was telling his wife, I still think the world of Butch and his whole family. So it means a lot to be invited here and see the old people. See all these beautiful faces.
Oh, nice recovery. Nice recovery. See what he learned when he did television? He's so polished now.
Race, religion, and politics. Never.
After this is done, I want you to tell me about Barry Kleindienst when he was not calm, because I've never known that part. So you and we can talk later.
No, I don't know about that. Barry taught me a lot.
Okay.
First time with Barry Kleindienst, my dad was winning lots of races. And he saw the boys coming up, my brother Ed and me. I'd race go-karts. Dad said, I think I'm selling my car. So he sold the car about July or August. I'm like, what the hell did he do that for? Well, we didn't know at the time, but he didn't want us racing. We're bored as heck. We don't know what we're going to do on a Friday and Saturday night. So we see a car somewhere near Clearfield for sale for $3,500 or something like that. So Ed says, I want to race. Dad says, well, go ahead. So we went and got it, brought it home. I can't show you because his first night at Selinsgrove, his legs were shaking so bad. And my dad said, Ed, are you okay? Yeah, Dad, I'm okay. Well, he proceeded to go out and finish dead last. He said, this car's a piece of crap. Dad says, all right, we'll work on it. We'll see what we got. So the next week, we go to the racetrack. He says, Dad, you need to get in and see if it's any good. He goes out. What does he do? Starts in the rear, wins the race. I said, yes. There was 3 races to go in the season. Guy wanted to buy the car, so that my dad sells him the car. My dad says, good, we're done racing. That's the first time I met Barry. Barry Kleindienst has a car. I'll never forget, that was my first ever race car. 64 Chevelle. My dad raced it. Won the track championship, Williamsgrove, Selinsgrove, both, oh man. And that's when we became friends with Barry. And when I walked in his shop, he had an old pipe, calm, never spoke a whole lot, but boy, he could build a damn engine. And he could do anything. And my dad and him won lots of races together. So that's my first time meeting Barry. And then I had the opportunity. Barry worked for me on my Busch team. He took care of Dick Trickle's motors and stuff like that. Pretty long time relationship.
So Barry doesn't talk about himself that much.
That's Barry.
Yeah. Well, Jimmy got here at 9, and the story started at 9:01. And they have not stopped, and there's plenty yet to be told, so I'm not going to get in the way of that. But I did want to just bring something up real quickly. I know we're out of alignment here chronologically, but my buddy Paul Sherchuk is here, and he reminded me that he said it was this weekend, wasn't sure what year it was, but on this weekend you would want a Busch race in Vegas. All right.
No, it wouldn't have been this weekend.
No?
Not Vegas. That was the spring race. I went there the year earlier.
Okay.
Went there the year earlier in spring.
Yep.
Was leading the race and the motor blowed up. Pissed me off. Went back the second time. This is on Friday because I met Ernest Borgnine that day. Ernest Borgnine come in and he says, I love the looks of your race car. And I loved Ernest Borgnine. I didn't ever see the movie, The Poseidon Adventure. And I loved Ernest Borgnine on McHale's Navy. I mean, that was just... Anyway, been very fortunate to meet a lot of people. And he came that Saturday morning. He said, look what I found, heads up penny. I said, well, tape it to the dash. He said, you're going to win today. We won. 92 grand we won. So that was pretty special. And that was one of my biggest paydays ever. And good memories.
You talked about, well, your dad was such an influence in your life. He was a force.
You know, I was telling Barry, my dad raised 7 kids, and my mom never went to the races. Now, she did go to the races with me when I got into the Cup Series and Nationwide Series, Busch Series at the time. But Mom would sit home when Dad was racing. She would sit in her rocking chair rocking. The minute we come home from Selinsgrove, wherever we were at, she'd bobble the head, count the heads, say, okay, I can go to bed now. That was Mom. But Dad, he had a temper. Then he taxed him. He said if you pushed him, he guarantee he's going to push you back twice as hard. That's the way he was. And me and Earnhardt used to talk a lot about my dad because he loved my dad. I became really good friends with Dale Earnhardt. Every week, he would come by the hauler and, hey, Pop, how you doing? He told me, he says, Ralph, his dad, Ralph, he says, every time I talk to your dad, it reminds me of my dad. He said, I wish my dad was still here like yours. And he built the Taj Mahal and the whole 9 yards, and he comes to the hauler, he goes, Spence, he goes, Jimmy, is your dad here? He says, no, he's coming in tomorrow. It was a Charlotte weekend. He says, okay. Next day, here comes Earnhardt. Pop, I want you to come to my shop Monday after the race. So we did, and I go over there with Dad. Earnhardt pushes me away. He says, get the hell away. He said, I'm going to show your dad the shop. So Earnhardt showed us the shop, and I'll never forget as long as I live. But yeah, we are all off track.
No, there's nothing off track here.
And
Just running.
I got my first shot with Buddy Baker, and back when we were racing, my dad never really liked to race on Sundays because my mom would take all of us to church, and then we'd get our candy and all that stuff and come home and we'd eat. And Dad, he was tough. But we built a racetrack. It was called IROSH, International Race of Shitheads. And my dad built the racetrack down at the junkyard. We had a junkyard. The racetrack is still there. My dad invited Buddy Baker and Earnhardt and them all. Oh, my God. People would pay big money for the tape if I could find it. So we were racing that night, big corn roast, and the wind got out, so we had to call the state troopers and block all the people from coming. We were racing there, and Earnhardt we've almost run out of cars, and Buddy Baker's still out there running, and me and Earnhardt said, Spencer, I need a car. So I said, well, jump in. He jumped in. He jumped in the other side and pushed me over. So he's driving the car around because he had busted his ball joint, and I says, Baker, I said, put him in the damn soupy hole over there in the third turn. We get a hold of Baker, and he pushed that son of a bitch. Earnhardt keeps pushing him, and Baker's going, whoa, whoa. You have to know Buddy. He gave me my first cup run. I was driving for Buddy at the time. And Buddy's out there in the mud hole, and he can't get out. He opens the door. Holy cow. Long story short, here we're up there having a corn roast, and everybody's eating, and Buddy could always tell a story. And Buddy always would say, oh, goddamn. Oh, goddamn. But anyway, he says, all at once, he says, I know I'm stuck in the soupy hole down there in the mud hole. And he says, I see Godzilla coming. My brother had a big cat. It was dark. It was 9 o'clock at 9:30 at night. 2 big eyes on it, 2 lights. And he comes, he says, Buddy, I'll get you out of there. And he picked Buddy up. Buddy would tell that story to everybody. But Earnhardt was there. We got pictures of him hugging my mom and dad. Put his head next to my dad, and he says, Ed, it's illegal to have this much fun. He came back the following year, and then we had to stop it because it got out of control because of the people and stuff. But about 6 months later, my dad, he says, hey, let's go over to the farm. I want to show you something. He says, I want to build a track like you got. And my dad said, let me teach you something, bud. He says, you don't have a junkyard. Dale says, you're right, Ed, I won't do it. He said, bud, just come up there and race when you have it. But we were good friends. Earnhardt was a pretty special person. It hurt the day that we lost him.
IROSH.
International Race of Shitheads.
Yeah. I'm thinking there's an entire line of apparel there somewhere, just waiting to be printed.
Hey, man, you got to listen. Tony Stewart, Richard Childress. I got another. Richard Childress and his pilot riding around. They run out of cars. Now, my mom was a cleaning fanatic. My mom has a laundry car, and in the back seat is 2 laundry baskets. Childress says, that thing looks like it's got the keys in it. Childress goes and jumps in the seat. He says to the pilot, come on, let's go. We got a car. You can tell Richard, he'll tell you the story. And my mom goes, Richard, that's my damn laundry car. Where you going? I'll bring it back in one piece. And he proceeded to go around, and who hits him? Earnhardt, right in the freaking door. And he goes to the pilot. The pilot says, that son of a bitch is crazy. He says, yeah, but he says, he really pissed me off because he says, now he knocked the radio out. The radio ain't working. But, if I had it on film, it's just incredible stuff. Tony Stewart wanted to do it every freaking week. He brought helmets. Oh, Smoke was there. And the best one was Robbie Gordon comes up. So we're about out of cars. That stupid son of a bitch goes and takes his rental car. He's out there, and he knocks the hell out of it. And he says to the guy, he said, did you put insurance on that? He says, I hope so. And he did. He knocked it. You can't believe the damage he did to the car. Those are good memories.
So you started out in the late model ranks.
Yep, like 1 year.
Right around 79, then you went to the modifieds?
First year, 79. Incident was Port Royal.
Yeah, that prompted
That
your
prompted
move.
it. And I actually went to Maryland, Beltsville. It wasn't Busch Cars, it was Grand Nationals. I went down there, I met with Emmanuel Zavakis. I was going to go dirt racing because I love dirt, so I went up. Dave Kneisel did all my rear ends and stuff. I became good friends with Dave after David built cars. He won Syracuse and stuff. But anyway, Dave said, you don't want to do this. He said, you're too good for this. He says, you need to go asphalt racing. And NASCAR was starting the touring series. And the most instrumental one was Jack Johnson. Jack said, I've heard about your dirt racing and your dad. He says, no. He said, you want to go asphalt racing. He says, as young as you are, you don't need to be doing this dirt. And that's what I did.
So you would have been
20 years old. not even.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think I got my first cup ride late 20s, and now they're doing it when they're 16.
Right. Shangri-La, Rookie of the
go.
Year.
Yeah, 79.
Yep.
Gail Clark, he built my motors. That guy taught me a lot about racing. When I first went to Barry's shop, I was impressed how clean it was. When I went to Gail Clark's, he would not let you touch the bearings with your fingers. The acid on your fingers, he says, no, you have to have rubber, whatever gloves. Chewed my head off. I says, oh, no, don't touch them, you know. Oh, whoa. And Gail was actually the crew chief for Jeff Bodine.
Okay.
And that's how I became known to Gail. And Gail was the one who told me, he says, you're pretty damn good at what you do, buddy. You know, it's like Lynn and I were talking before about younger drivers. We want to help them. You want to see a young driver do good. And so many young drivers today are afraid to ask you.
Really?
Yeah, you see it a lot. I think the internet is changing them, but there's still a lot. I was very fortunate when I moved south to race a couple times against Richard Petty, Bobby Allison. They teach you a lot.
Different times. 82 and 83, Shangri-La, NASCAR Winston Racing Series track titles there.
That was my first. I bought a car from Richie, and I didn't like it.
Richie Evans.
Yeah, my dad actually bought it, and I was selling tires at Evergreen and stuff, trying to make money to race, plus I had a car lot. I knew we were doing good because we were winning races, but I remember Gail Clark telling me, you need to go buy a Troyer car, Maynard Troyer. I said, you know what, I'll call him up. What do I got to lose? So I was broke. My wife, Pat, and my sister go on a cruise because I was supposed to go on the cruise, and I said, well, take Chrissy. So they went on a cruise. I stayed home, and I sold 13 cars that week at the car lot, and I says, yeah, good idea to buy a race car out about now. So Thursday called Maynard up. I said, hey, Maynard, I want a new car. I said, listen, I want chrome on it. I want it nice. He said, it'd be about $9,200. I said, all right, I'll send you a deposit. He says, no, I'll just build you one. Don't worry about it. In about a week or so, he says, I'll have it almost done. He says, then send me half the money. So I did. So, Pat says, what's that check out of that account for? I says, race car. I knew it. She was very supportive, and so was my dad. But we bought a tour car, and I ended up becoming the house driver. And Maynard said, as good as you are at Owego, New York, you can go anywhere and win. He said, when you can master Shangri-La, Owego, you can. And he was right. I've been fortunate to win every modified racetrack I've been at.
So you transition to the modifieds, and you're looking at the asphalt end of things. At what point then are you moving toward the Busch series?
You know, Richie Evans and I were good friends. We didn't end up real good friends, but because you raced the first championships. In '84 I did. But he said to me, I said, Richie, I said, how comes you never went cup racing? Because hell, he went down there. Do you remember when they built the modifieds? He went down there to Daytona on Friday with the NASCAR modifieds.
Okay.
He kicked their ass. Richie was very good. He beat Darrell Waltrip, Bobby Allison, all of them. He goes, I make more money driving modifieds than you do driving NASCAR. Because he had BR DeWitt as the sponsor, the whole 9 yards. So in '84, I raced Richie and I went broke. I literally went broke again. I said, well, time to go south. In '84, I started selling a lot of cars and stuff and met some great people. I drove for Art Murray out of Rhode Island. I drove for Eddie Flimke. I drove for Rini Garland, not Charlene Garland, out of Canada, and was very fortunate. They paid me good money, and I won for them. I went to Westboro, went to a lot of these races, and, you know, I became fairly good friends with Richie, and he said, what are you going to do next year? And I said, I'm going south. I got a phone call. My buddy said, you ain't going to believe what happened today. And I said, shit, no. You know, Richie gets killed, and then, you know, a month goes by, and Hutter calls me up, and he says, Gene DeWitt wants you to drive his car, modified. I said, okay. So that sounds like a good deal. And that would have been 86. So over the winter, everything's going good. I ordered 2 brand new Troyer cars. That was a dream because I was going to have a Goodyear tire deal, I was going to have a motor deal, and a credit card. I never had that. And that was pretty cool. And I said, man, I can make some money doing modifieds. Gene DeWitt's son says to Mr. DeWitt, we can't have him drive. He's from Pennsylvania. We have to have a New York driver, Gene DeWitt Concrete Company. So Hutter called me back out and he said, listen, he says, Gene's son's saying you can't drive his cars. I said, well, that's great. I said, a month ago, and we got to be at the circuit. He goes, well, Frank Cece asked me if you could drive his cars. So I said, okay. So I went up. Frank had his car sitting there. I go to the Shangri-La the first night, Owego, New York, and I'm leading the race. And George Kent passes me. George Kent's driving for BR DeWitt. My brother Ed says, he does not get passed. So something's wrong with that car. Well, the crew chief was pissed off and all this. My brother Ed says, hang on a second. We pull it over. Ed says, jack it up. So we jack it up. He takes the rear wheels off and the rear end's bent. Ed said, the damn rear end's bent in that car, Frank. Get the hell out of here. It's a brand new rear end. Well, Ronnie Kent said to Frank, get used to it because that's what's going to happen to you every race. Frank said, I got news for you, son of a bitch. You guys are in a lot of trouble. Because they pissed him off. So Frank says, whatever you need, go. We had George Kent, 2 races to go in the season. We had locked the championship up. So Frank Cece was very instrumental in me winning those races. But the moral of the story for me was the best story ever. I was in Oswego, New York, and Mr. DeWitt was a fantastic man with a cane. Oswego, New York had the best hot dogs in the world. Sabat's. Anyway, I'm standing there, and he goes, I'll get that. And I look, oh, it's Mr. DeWitt. He says, Jimmy, come over, I'll talk to you. So I go over there, and I sit down there by him, and he goes, congratulations. I said, what's that, Mr. DeWitt? He says, oh, you won this championship. He says, you're 10 times the driver I got. And he said, Richie always told me that. I just want to tell you congratulations. He said, I made a big mistake. I said, it's never too late. He says, no, I'm done. He did my last year. And we won the championship, and he quit sponsoring NASCAR Modifieds. Then we went on and won the second time again and with Frank, and then we decided to go south racing. Pretty cool. The good memories.
Tell us about that decision and the move south, because
It's hard.
I mean, we're talking maybe 35 years ago or so,
Yeah.
and it was a different world then. I mean, that's a different culture.
You know, NASCAR didn't care. I was in Stafford Springs, Connecticut about 1982, 1983. It was a spring sizzler. I went out there, and they implemented a Hoosier tire rule. The tires were junk. They blow right off the beads. Well, I blew 3 of them out that day, and I lost my front brakes. So when I lost my front brakes, I went in to fix them, and NASCAR says, you're done for the day. So Jim Hunter at Stafford, you have to understand, this is the grandstands, and this was the back of the grandstands. Okay. And I was parked right there, and Hunter is out there, and he goes, so he's making them wait. Mike Joy's there. That's how I got Mr. Excitement.
So
I
that
said,
was it.
Yeah, that's what got me Mr. Excitement. So I started in the rear field, come back, got second.
Okay.
The fans were pounding, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, Eddie Yarrington and them come to me after the race was over. They said, we told you not. I said, listen, when I pulled out to that tower and that guy had the chain there, I didn't run the chain down. I said to him, I said, you 2 options. You either drop the chain or I run it over. I said, he took the smart option. I said, he dropped the chain and let me go through. So I said, it wasn't my fault. They said that don't be a smart aleck. But anyway, that's them guys. That was Ed Root and Eddie Yarrington. So they were going to fine me $2,000. I call up NASCAR. I get the letter. I call Bill France. And Bill France goes, hello? I said, Mr. France, you heard what happened Sunday at Stafford? Yeah, I think I did hear about that. He goes, why did you disobey the officials? I said, man, Mr. France, Jim Hunter was on the back of the damn grandstands waving for me to come on. Here he was on speakerphone with France. He goes, no. I wasn't telling you to come back on the track. I was giving you the thumbs up that you had done a good job. I said, you sons of bitches. France says, you just keep doing what you're doing. I said, what about this fine? He says, what fine? So I knew where the strings were pulled in. That became Mr. Excitement, and then from there, became pretty successful.
Not arguing that. Full season with the Busch Series, you end up, I think this is 1988, 7th in the point standings in the 34 car. You had 5 top 5s, 13 top 10s, pretty solid.
Yeah, we were sitting, I was in the spring of '89, and I was sitting in the garage with me and 2 other guys working on the car, and the phone rings. And we're in this little shop, Herb Nabs. Man, we were hurting for money. Phone rings, they're underneath the car working. Hello? Yeah, this is Buddy Baker. Is Jimmy there? I says, yeah, and if you're effing Buddy Baker, I'm the President of the United States. And I hung the phone up. So we didn't have cell phones at the time. So anyway, I go back out in the garage, and Al goes, who was that? Some asshole said he was Buddy Baker, and he wanted me to drive his car. Do you know Buddy Baker fired Greg Sachs yesterday? I said, what? He goes, they fired Greg Sachs yesterday. Jesus Christ, I said. Stupid. Well, we go back to work about 10, 15 minutes later, the phone rings again. I run in there as quick as I can. Is Jimmy there? Goddamn, Jimmy, you there? This is Jimmy. He said, this is Buddy Baker. Do you want to drive my goddamn race car, don't you? I said, I'll be over immediately. Bring a seat. Not supposed my mom never used God's name in vain, but that's what Buddy was. Anyway, drove over to the garage, put the car seat in the car, and went to Dover. That was my first cup race with Buddy, 1989. Gave me my break.
You almost missed it.
Can you believe that?
Unbelievable.
Drove for Bobby Allison. I was very fortunate.
You talked about your relationship with Dale. I've heard you tell a story about the time Dale asked you to test a car for him at Indy.
Oh, yeah. I got one before that.
Yeah, whatever you got, bring it on.
Nobody knew Earnhardt like he really was Earnhardt. He was a hell of a race car driver, but he was special. Like every one of us, if you needed something, he'd help you. But his persona at the races was different. We would go to Isabella's to eat lunch every so often, about once a week. We were driving to Isabella's, and I was sitting in the passenger seat. I guess it was about 92 maybe, 93 maybe. We're driving down Linwood Road, and he sees these two black guys over there working the church. He spins his truck around. He says, "Hey, boys, what you doing?" The old preacher says we need to get this here leveled out. Get in the truck. He says, "I'm going to buy you boys lunch." So they jump in the truck. He has the pack phone. Remember the old pack phone? They'd blast you out.
Yeah.
I forget who the guy was. He says, "Hey, tell Blue Max to send a load of 2B gravel over here to Linwood Road and Zion Church." And he says, "Get the Bobcat and get your ass up there and level that, grade all that driveway for him, parking area." So we go to Isabella's. About that time, about an hour, because Earnhardt, he loves sweet tea and talk, and he loves Sundrop. He loves Sundrop. And we sat there and talked. Those two guys were just super guys, and they were up in age. And we learned a lot about them and their church and stuff. And we stop on the way back, and it's all leveled out. And he says, "I know who you be now, man. I know who you be." And that's Southern. That's typical. Earnhardt goes, "You don't worry about it. Yous don't owe me nothing. We're going to pray for you." And Earnhardt, he says, Earnhardt believed in the Lord. I believe Dale's in a better place. He was saved. Darrell Waltrip, his wife, Stevie Waltrip, was big into that. Not preaching, but make sure you were saved and stuff. So I think Earnhardt's saved. But that's the stuff that he did. I had 2 kids, and my wife was living in Uniqueville, and I promised Pat that I would take her and the kids that weekend. We were going to take a weekend off, and we were going to go to Carowinds. So about a month before that, Earnhardt says, "Jimmy, I need to come by the shop." All right, so I go to the shop. He says, "Sit in that car." He had an old 40 Econoline seat. I sat in the seat and everything else, and I said, "Wow." I said, "These are comfortable. I see why you like them." He says, "You're driving this thing at Indy for me." And I says, "Oh, no, I'm not. Ain't going to happen." He says, "That's our off weekend. You're driving for me." I says, "I am not driving this car. I am not going to Indianapolis." He goes, "Yeah, you are." I said, "I'm not." I left. Following weekend, we go to the Cup race. He comes over and he says, "You're driving that damn car." I says, "Dale, I promised Pat that I was taking them kids to Carowinds on Sunday." He says, "I promise you. I mean, you will be back Saturday night at all costs to have them kids at Carowinds. I promise you." And I go, "What if it rains?" He says, "Mike Collier will fly you home himself." I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And I was hurting for money at the time, and one thing led to another. It was one of the greatest days, one of the greatest weekends. I says, "Babe, I'll be back Saturday night." I mean, he promised me. She's okay, and I think he's going to give me a couple grand. I could use the money. So I drive up with Tony, Uri, Sr., and Jr. What a great time. Get my own motel room. I can't believe this crap. And I don't know why Earnhardt's doing what he's doing, because he could have got some other people to do it. I realized after I did it why he did, because I was winning some Busch races, and he trusted me. So I said to him, I said, "I'll go up there, but I'm not going to do nothing to the car." He says, "Make the car the way it's supposed to. I want to know." I said, "Okay." So he goes into Michigan to the IROC race. So he flies back that afternoon. Just, man alive, he could draw a freaking crowd. That freaking grandstands, and they were lined up everywhere, you know. So I was practicing with a Saturday, and I said, "Tony," I said, "this is what, make a long story short," I said, "I feel this, it needs to be a little bit freer, dead center corner." They did everything. I said, "I fixed it." I qualified 5th. I get in there, and he comes in, he goes, "What's the story?" And I said, "Dead neutral, little snug to start after about 4 or 5 laps." I said, "That bitch is on the money." He said, "Okay." Drives from the rear of the field to the lead. And unfortunately, he had an air gun break, and he ends up finishing 3rd in the race. We jump in the van on the way home. So Treese is in the van, and Earnhardt's in the front seat, and Mike's in the other seat, and I'm in the back. So, "Oh, Mike, stop here, stop here." So he goes and he stops at the pay shack. "Where you going?" "Don't worry about it." And he gets a freaking brown envelope. Brown's pack. Whoa, I know what that is. That's dead presidents. And we get to the airport. Before that, he says, "Leave your luggage." We get at the airport, we'll get it later. You come to the shop, pick it up. I'll drop you off at Task, because we landed at Spencer Airport up near Spencer, North Carolina, which is near Enidville, Kannapolis. Go to get in the plane. Tree says, "No, you're not." Said some stuff to Teresa, and he said, "Yes, he is." He's sitting right there, so I did. So we're coming home, and Earnhardt says, "What the hell did you do to that car?" And I says, "Nothing." I said, "Dale, I told you I was going to get in the car." I says, "Tony changed the camber." I said, "They realized the camber gain wasn't right." I said, "He changed both upper A arms." Went out, and I said, "That son of a bitch was hooked." He says, "You're damn right it was." He goes, "What do you think's wrong?" I says, "Dale, the last time I drove a Moroso motor, I believe I could pull spark plug wire off and beat that motor you had." And he goes, I know, that's what Childress has been telling me. I said, Dale, your motors are terrible. I mean, they were down major. Dennis Fisher was building them. They were terrible motors. So I fall asleep on the airplane, and in Teresa I land, and we have a new Suburban. I get in the back seat, and he drives me off the knee from my house, and he hands me a big white envelope. I didn't think nothing of it, threw it on the counter, go to bed. About 7 o'clock, my wife comes in, wakes me up. Hey, there's an awful lot of money in that envelope. I go, how much is in there? She says, $9,000. I said, he must have made a mistake. Don't worry about it. So we go to Carrot. Monday I come over to our shop, reach in my back pocket. He's up in his office signing autographs. And I throw the envelope down. What's the matter? I says, I think you made a mistake. Well, you want more? I couldn't believe it. And I said, Dale, you know how much is in there? He says, it's worth every penny to me. He's like, I got 40 grand to do that deal anyway. What are you worried about? So Earnhardt made a lot of friggin' money. That was interesting. But good friends with Dale. It hurt that day pretty bad when we lost him, but part of the sport, I guess.
Doesn't make it any easier.
No.
Another guy that, Jimmy, that you've talked so fondly about over the years, Bobby Allison.
Oh.
Tell us about getting hooked up with him and what it was like to work with Bobby Allison.
You know, Joe Gibbs is probably a strong Christian. I mean, he gives you his testimony. It's absolutely phenomenal. But Bobby Allen's pretty close. Bobby lost both of his sons. Now he's lost Judy, my dad used to say. I finished third at Nazareth. Passed Bobby Allison to get third. He finished fourth. He came over, and we were talking there. He said to me, you did a good job. We became pretty good friends. And one of my first times at Daytona, I was parked right next to him because we were on the outside looking in because they had the points lined up. The cars with the points were lined up. And then we were in the other garage, Darrell Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt, because they weren't in the points, and that's where the new cars had to park. I was fortunate to park next to Bobby. I qualified 7th, he qualified 8th. And he's looking at my car, and he goes, nope, put that spoiler back up. We put the spoiler back up, slowed the car down about 2.5 tenths. Saturday comes, and I'm out there, and he sees me on the introduction, sees me on the pit road. He walks by, and he looks at my car, and he goes, buddy, what did I tell you? No. He said, bump that thing up. Second lap, coming off a 4, caution, spin. Yeah, who the hell do you think it is? Me. Here I go spinning in the damn infield. I don't hit nothing. I said, oh, thank God. I says, Ed, bump the goddamn spoiler up like Bobby said. So I bumped it up, and anyway, that was the year Bobby got hurt. Bobby won the Daytona 500, and he won the Goodies 300 the day before. Won both races. Bobby was watching my career with Buddy and all that, and I was driving for Dick Moroso. What happened was I was driving for Travis. Travis ran out of money.
Travis Carter. That would have been 91. So I was driving for Moroso, the Daly's first aid car and all that. We won a bunch of races. And I was at Myrtle Beach. There was a rain delay at Michigan, and they were all watching us at Myrtle Beach. And I was fortunate enough to make 3 laps that day. It's weird, but you get a feeling that sometimes the good Lord's watching over you. So Dick Moroso, who's Robbie, was a hell of a race car driver, got killed 2 years earlier. Lots of guys drove his race car. And he come to Travis, he says, I fired Mike Wallace. He says, I want Jimmy to drive my car. And he says, well, yeah, you can drive his car. So I did. And we won 3 races. But we were at Myrtle Beach. Mark Reno had built a hell of a car. Saturday morning comes. Dick goes, Rinaldi said you changed the gear. I said, yeah. I said, I need this gear. He said, the motor's going to blow up. I said, no, it won't. I said, I'll lift. Be careful, because he said, if you don't, it's going to blow up. I said, no, I'll lift on new tires. It'll turn. Luck would have it, I had that gear in it. Because on the restart, I was leading the race, and the freaking thing jammed in gear. The Hurst shifter pin broke. So it jammed in 3rd gear. So by the time they got it fixed, I was 3 laps down. Go back out on the track. Steve Grissom was leading the race then, and I made the 1 lap up. I'm sitting there 2 laps down, and the caution comes out. And Dick Moroso comes on the radio, and he says, I think you need to park that car and save it for next week. And Mark Reno was one of the best crew chiefs I ever had. He says, we don't park nothing, Dick. He says, we worry about this race, we'll worry about next week. Dick says, that car's too fast, I want to run it Indy. He says, I don't give a shit, we're going to run it. He says, Jimmy, what do you think? And I says, I believe we can make these laps up. So you would line up back then on the inside. Luck would happen, we made up. Yeah, the lap car. We made the laps up and won the race. But under the rain delay, got a phone call, and it was Bobby Allison. He said, you think you're going to make the other lap up? I said, yeah. He goes, I'm going to talk to you on Monday. I want you to stop by the shop. I said, okay. I won the race. Monday comes, I go over to see Bobby. He goes, I'm having a problem with Rebessis. They want to leave. They want to keep one of the greatest dirt racers ever to drive a dirt late model. Jeff Purvis, hell racer. Good friends with Jeff. Still is today. Jeff tore a bunch of stuff up. Wilkesboro,
They tore 2 more cars up. They have 1 car left in the shop. And Bobby calls me up. He said, I want you to come over Tuesday, put your seat in the car. Purvis is taking all his stuff out. He's gone. We want you to drive for us. Because what had happened was they put Hut Strickland in it, and Hut got fired. Purvis got put in it, and then I got in it. It's interesting because Hagerstown, Frank Plessinger, he owns Hagerstown. Him, Bob Bilby, and Bobby were owners of that team. They were like 28th in the points. And there was a lot of money if you could move the car in the top 20. I went in there with Jimmy Fenning. That was the best crew chief I had, without a question, even though I didn't win with him. And we went in that shop. There was 4 races to go. We were going to win Charlotte. That was the first one. We qualified. I was running 3rd, and we were tracking down Kowicki, whoever it was at the time. And they come on the radio, and they said, you are about 3/10 quicker a lap than them guys right now. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And Dick Trickle, ironically, wasn't his fault at all. Dick ran me high. And I thought I got the wall a little bit, but I didn't. It got a little loose, and so about 7:30 in the morning on Monday, Bobby said, what are you doing? I said, taking the kids to school. I want you to come over here as soon as you can. I said, okay. So Monday, I shoot over. I told Pat, I said, babe, I'm going to run over there. I do. Bobby says, come out and show you something. So the right rear truck arm was cracked all the way around. There was 2 U-bolts that went down the thing like that, and there was an 1/8-inch plate of steel. That's the only thing that held it together. And Bobby's looking at that, and he goes, that's what cost us the race yesterday. But more importantly, he said, the good Lord was watching over you, because he says, if that would have broke, you probably wouldn't be here. And I said, holy hell, Bobby. He said, you did 4th. We got 4th. He said, just hang on to the car, because Jimmy, I said, Jimmy, this has gotten very, very loose. I said, if I step on the brake, it gets worse. He said, but don't you, so hang on. So we hang on, got 4th, because there were like 20 laps to go at Charlotte. You're running pretty fast, but you don't know what's going to break. We go test the next week, Tuesday at Rockingham. We're going to win Rockingham, and the freaking air gun breaks. End up losing a lap, making a lap back up, finished 7th. We go to Phoenix. Davey was racing for the championship, leading the race. And all day long, we kept having bad pit stops. And I said, BA, you have to fix the pit stops. He said, I'm taking care of it. So he gets a new jackman. The last 2 pit stops, we come in 3rd. Instead of coming in and running 6th or 7th, we come out 3rd. The last pit stop of the day, come out running 2nd. Wow, what an awesome job. Great, guys. I'm coming down pit road, going down the back straightaway. I look, I said, son of a bitch. 28 car. Davey. Bobby. Yeah. I said, we got a problem in front of us. Jimmy Fenning. What do you mean? I said, you'll see in less than a minute. We're coming down the front straightaway. I had an open face helmet on. Mike Keys, I'm watching him. He goes, that's no problem. He says, that's just another car that you have to pass today to win this race. And I was like, did I just hear that right? And I said to myself, holy cow. He goes, listen to me, buddy. He says, you've done a great job today. Now that car is racing for the championship, but you need to pass that car so we can win. And he says, you remember, we'll be racing that same position next year. So you treat him like you want to be treated and go get him. I was absolutely, and couldn't say nothing. I waited, and Jimmy comes by, is he okay? I says, yeah, I'm okay. Went back 15, 18 laps to go in the race. We passed Davey to get the lead, and the freaking motor broke a rocker arm. I said, Jesus Christ, how the hell could that happen? Broke a rocker arm, and we still finished 5th. Went to Atlanta, had a car capable of winning that race. So Davey was in the 28 car that day, and I said to Bobby, Bobby, listen to me. Swervin' Urban is driving like a maniac. He's driving a Kodak car. And I says, tell Davey to stay behind me. And I said, well, I can protect him. Bobby says, yeah, because we were in the top 20 in points now, and we were in the top 10 in the race, and my concern was to help Davey win the championship. Because if Davey would have finished in the top 10, he was locked in. And at the time, we were running like 8th or 9th, and we weren't running that hard. And this is no lie. If you guys go back on YouTube or whatever, you watch that wreck. You watch the white and blue red number 12 go on the inside of that wreck. And Davey was ahead of me, and he wrecked, unfortunately. And Larry McReynolds was the crew chief. And I told Bobby what we were going to do. And Bobby went down there and told Robert Yates. And Larry McReynolds never told Davey. Pretty pissed off. Bobby Allison was pretty pissed off. So after Davey wrecks, Bobby says, there's only one thing you can do. Go get him. Well, that's the day that Alan Kowicki and Bill ran for the championship. We know it all here. I'm going to get him. So I went after their ass. And I was as fast as they were, and I think I was faster. And about 100 laps to go in the race, I was wore out. I was like, ain't no way. So I come on the radio and I says, yeah, the car's getting a little tight. So I started slowing down. I was falling out of the seat. I still can't believe how tired I was. And I realized how in shape you had to be to race, the intensity level that Kowicki and Bill put on. So after the race was over, we finished 4th. I think Jeff and I ended up beating me. And I come in, I said, Bobby and Jim, I need to talk to you guys in the hauler. So we go up in the hauler. I close the door. Bobby says, we know what happened. I'll help you. We got to fix it. Jimmy says, we know what happened. But he says, you're our driver. We had a great year, but we didn't have no money. But we had a great year. That was the best team I drove for, even I never won. It was Bobby Allison. I remember when Davey got killed. I was there when Clifford got killed in Michigan. He lost both of his boys. Bobby Allison was a pretty special person. He's still my friend today. Talk to him a lot. I still talk to him at least once a month.
Jimmy, there was a story you told I found just so intriguing. You were testing, I guess driving for Bobby, and I think it was Super Speedway.
Yeah.
And the car was what, a little loose,
Yeah.
getting in? And he gave you a piece of advice that just doesn't seem to make sense.
It did make sense. We were at Daytona. You know, we kept working. All we worked on was do not turn the steering wheel. Try to keep the wheels least amount of possible. Don't turn the wheel. Try to let the car drive itself. And we kept working on working. And Bobby would pound in my head, whatever you do, keep doing it identical. Don't change your line. The computer could pick up the speeds. I said, Bobby, I said, it's a little free. I said, when I roll that thing down in the corner, it starts to free up. I have to back off the wheel. He says, turn it to the right. I went, what? He goes, when you go down in the corner, take all the pressure off the wheel and push it back to the right a little bit. He said, it'll tighten it up. It'll put wedge in it. I says, Bobby, man, we're running 200 mile an hour and into the corner. He goes, trust me, it'll work. Now, you don't panic, he said. You just do it gradually. And I went out there and I tried it, and it worked. I was like, son of a... And it worked. Learned from a lot of this. I remember working with Junior when we went in '94. We was at Daytona, and Banjo Matthews come over. Junior goes, Banjo. He goes, boys complaining about the car doing this and that. Banjo had a big, thick old pair of glasses. Smart son of a big old Banjo Matthews. And he had built a front steer car with a rear steer suspension. The pivot points had to be at the right height. And him and Junior, you gotta see them two big old bellies, and you know, they laying on the ground looking, and they take a tape measure. Banjo looked at Junior. He said, can't fix this son of a bitch. He said, they put the clip on wrong. I said, boy, that's great. So we went on to Daytona. Unfortunately, we wrecked, which I sort of figured we were gonna with what happened with the front end, because you could never turn the car back the other way. That was after Bobby I was driving. This is '94 for the Daytona 500. We won Daytona. We've beaten Ernie. Back to Talladega in April and finished second to Earnhardt. So that's pretty cool. I remember Teddy Musgrave drove my car, and he says, there is no way you can drive that car that way. I says, well, if you ever drove for Bobby Allison, you would do that. And he says, you will wreck. I says, no, I don't. And we didn't wreck.
I want you to tell just one more short story about Dale. There was something he told you that he did before the race on pit road.
Man.
It just sort of separated him from everybody else. That was his mindset. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was. Schrader would come over. We'd all sit in Earnhardt's old barn. We'd bullshit, tell stories. Earnhardt had 5-gallon buckets. You know, the old, like, plaster buckets of water. And that was our meeting room. So this is before I was cup racing. This would have been 80, 88. We were sitting there one night. I says, Earnhardt hated skunky beer. He loved Bud Light. He could tell, he said, that's skunky. Throw that. He'd make me go get more Bud Light. But anyway, I says, Earnhardt. So they were all like mingling. I sat there next to him. I says, Earnhardt. I says, what makes you think you're so damn good? I don't know. He said, I guess I just think I'm better than everybody. He says, what I do is that before the race starts, he would always get on his car, and he would sit on the windowsill of his car, slide his butt down in there, get on the windowsill of his car. Wherever he started, he'd look back and he'd go, to himself, ain't nobody here good enough to beat me there. I believe I can get all those guys in front of me. I believe I can beat every one of them. He'd slide back in the car. Determination. Paxton could tell you. I mean, you knew who you could race against. You knew how determination. A lot of guys never had the focus and the determination. They always would complain about their car. Earnhardt taught me one time. He said, listen, you have a 3-foot yardstick. You tell them to get that son of a bitch within that 3-foot yardstick, and you handle it the rest of the way. It's a lot more complicated now, but he was right. If it's tight, you loosen it up. If it's loose, you tighten it up. You have that yardstick. You got to drive that car. And I remember one time Bill Elliott telling me, Ray Abraham says, listen, he said, I need you to talk to Casey Kane. And I think the world of Casey. And Casey was just overdriving all the time. And Bill was his teammate. Bill says, he's the best at telling you this story. He says, Casey, I've done it my whole life. I always drove to the edge and beyond, and I usually didn't come back. He says, you got to learn that you only can push that car to 9.5, 10, and that's it. If you go over, you're going to wreck. You're wrecking a lot, and that's what I did. And I said, you got to back up and tell the crew chief to fix that car. And the biggest thing that I found in racing was that's why Kirk Shelmerdine and Earnhardt were so good together. And Earnhardt hated Larry McReynolds. you hated certain people because I knew the day was over for Chad Knaus. I was sitting with Rick Hendrick, and Jimmy Johnson was out there, and Chad Knaus was telling him how to drive that car. And I said to myself, that's the end of this, man. You don't become a 7-time champ by listening to your crew chief tell you how to drive that damn race car. And I knew that marriage was over. I said, that's instant divorce. It's funny because talking about being booed and yay, and we were at Watkins Glen, and we were coming across the track, and man, these people were going crazy. Yay! Oh, and my buddy TC, he's 80-some years old with me, Alex, my best friend. And Mike says, TC, can you believe this? And TC said no, because he said the last time he left here, them sons of bitches booed him so bad he couldn't stand it. And now they're applauding. So Mike said, what? It's just how it changes. But we were getting introduced to Dover. I don't know what happened the week before. I guess they must have thought I'd done something wrong, which I never thought I did anything wrong. And we were coming across the dire intros. They are booing and yaying like no tomorrow. I think I started was 17th and Earnhardt was 18th. No, Earnhardt come across first. Booed and yayed, gone crazy. So he's sitting in the back of the pickup truck waiting for me, and they start booing and yaying for me. And I'm like, son of a, why are they booing? Get up in the hauler, and Earnhardt puts his arm around me and he goes, doing good, buddy. He said, because when people are yelling, you got to appreciate it. I hate to pick on people, but the next guy up was Brett Bodine, and then the next guy up, they never made a sound. I got his point. I said, wow, that's interesting. And one thing about being booed and yayed, that you're doing your job. And I mean, you look back, AJ Foyt, Mario Andretti, you look back, they hated Kyle Busch. I'll never eat another M&M in my life. And they're the first ones to buy an M&M. I mean, what the hell has M&M's got to do? It's the greatest candy in the world. But Kyle Busch, because they didn't like him. But I had a talk with him one time, because one Bristol, I was doing TV and part-time truck racing. He smashed a guitar, and then he wins the race at Bristol. And he said, this is the worst piece of shit I ever drove in my life. Now, that was the car of the morning. He just won the race. So the following week, we was at Darlington. I believe we were going to go to Texas the following week. And Mr. Hendrick and Mr. France were up in the hauler. And Buster Otten comes over to the thing, and he goes, hey, some guys want to talk to you up in the hauler. I said, oh, shucks. What do I do now? So I go up into the hauler, and old man France is sitting there, and he said, close the door. So I closed the door, and they said, we need you to do us a favor. We need to talk to Kyle. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And Bill says, explain to him that the sport doesn't need him. We want him, but if he wants to, we can kick his ass out just like anybody else. So you know the old story, because I had that talk too. Certain drivers would tell you what you're doing right and wrong. We were in the truck race Thursday. I went to the hauler. I knew he was qualified, so I was sitting there waiting at the truck, like we always just sit on the director's chairs, and one of the crew members goes, you need to move. I says, no, you need to leave me alone. Because I says, I'm in a talkative mood, which I'm not going to talk to you anybody. I got to talk to Kyle. So you just need to be on your way. So I said, you need to move. I says, no, you don't know what I'm telling you. Anyway, long story short, the other guy come over. He says, whoa. He says, there was an official there. He says, get the hell away from here. Anyway, so here comes Kyle. Very respectful guy. Hey, Jimmy, what's up? I said, I need to talk to you. So he said, let me change. So he goes up in the hauler to change. He comes back out. He goes, I said, Kyle, I need to talk to you. And then we go in between the two haulers. He goes, boy, I don't know if I should do that. I know what you've done to my brother. I says, Kyle, it's got nothing to do with your brother. It's just got something to do with you and what's going on. All right. So we go up in between the hauler. He's smirking and laughing and everything. I said, Kyle, this is no joking matter. I said, you realize there's a lot of people in this sport you respect, but there's two that I respect up more than anybody. One of them is your car owner, and the other one's Mr. France. And I said, the last one either can make you stay or let you leave. That's totally up to you. I don't know. I said, Kyle, if he wants you gone, you can be gone. That's just the way NASCAR operates. Now, Mr. France knows you're a good draw, but he wants me to talk to you about something. I said, do you realize how many guys out there raced their whole life and never won a trophy? And you broke a cherished trophy like you did at the guitar. He knows I'm serious now. He goes, so? Just kind of stop and think a minute about what you did. You disgraced the sport. You disgraced the trophy. I says, I got another one for you. You just won Bristol. That's when we're still selling out. 120,000 people, and you said the car's a piece of shit. Kyle, do you know how many guys never won a cup race? They want to run a cup, and he says, thanks for talking to me. I said, Kyle, I'm just telling you for your own good. Still didn't straighten him out because Rick still fired him. What I think straightened him out was Samantha, his wife. And he come to me about 3 years later, and he goes, you know that talk we had? I said, yeah. He says, you know, I thought about it. And he says, you know, you were right. I just wish I would have acted quicker. And I think Joe Gibbs helped him a lot, too, because I think the biggest thing, I was talking to Rick, but he still confides in Rick a lot. The biggest thing with Kyle was that Rick and Kyle still do good together. Everybody trusts Rick Hendrick. Everybody trusts Joe Gibbs and that. And you keep a lot of stuff in-house. I said to myself, can you imagine being a young guy winning races and your car owner says, we don't need you any longer. And he's the number one car owner in the sport. You have to say to yourself driving home, what the hell just happened? And I think that helped him along. Yeah. And then Joe Gibbs hired him, and you know, it was history. Hell of a driver. Right. Talented, one of the greatest ever, I think.
Jimmy, we talk about, we'll call the primary storylines, what's up front, everybody sees, you know, the racing, the rivalries, that type of thing. I mean, you've touched on it briefly, but talk a little bit about the secondary storyline, the politics of NASCAR, and what goes on behind the scenes. My buddy Paul had worked for Carlisle Events, and they brought Richard Petty in for an event, and he was having a conversation with Richard, and Richard at one point during the conversation said to him, it's not a race, it's a show.
The one thing that Mr. France Sr. started, he saw back in the 40s, there was promoters putting races on all over the country, and nobody had organized it. Nobody had control to where that anybody could race anywhere. That's William France. That's the old man, and he started NASCAR. Him and a bunch of other guys, Daytona Beach, the whole 9 yards. I was talking to Mr. Melvin Joseph one time, the guy that built Dover, how they were building Talladega, and how they relied the people behind the scenes that helped them build racetracks. And then Bill got in charge, and he learned from his dad the same thing. I mean, they went through some tough times, but they tried to police the sport. They tried to make it as competitive as it was. I remember when Taurus days, they had the Luminas. So the Tauruses came out, and that was right after the Thunderbirds. And they had won like 6 or 7 in a row. And Earnhardt says, Bill wants to talk to us. So we went into the hauler. Earnhardt said, tell him, Spence. And I said, well, Bill, when them cars get in yaw, they gained about 700 counts of downforce. And Earnhardt said, that's what I've been telling you, Bill. And then I remember one time with the Luminas were way better than the Thunderbirds. France would adjust the spoilers, adjust the rules to try to make the field balanced. When you get in a conversation with him, he would always sit at his desk in the hauler, and he always had his back to the crowd. When that hauler was parked, the grandstands was behind him. He'd go, that's what we're doing. And that message was, we're worried about the fans. We got to keep the fans going. And I said, Bill, how do you police this thing? These guys have no clue what they're doing today compared to what we went through. We went through the 5 and 5 rule. We went through freaking rules. You talk about changes. No fan wants to hear, well, we had a good day today. Finished 8th, had a good point. What the hell are you talking about? 8th is a good points day? What the hell's going on with this sport? I remember when Earnhardt and Rusty, I remember how, they talk about aero push. Hell, a fan could care less about aero frickin' push. They want to see a goddamn race. And that's what Bill always would put on. And the drivers were their own worst enemy. I mean, Bill had to put restrictor plates on this. There was 2 ways to face the restrictor plate races. Buddy Baker taught me, if you see a seagull, you follow that son of a bitch. Or you could just sit there and say, you know what, it's a matter of time. I listened to drivers at Daytona and Talladega say it's just a matter of time I'm going to be in a wreck. Those are the guys Bobby Allison and Buddy Baker and Junior Johnson loved to race against because they had him beat already. Old man Earnhardt, he could see here. I mean, people would laugh, and he was incredible at watching the angle of the car. He was one of the best there was. He won all. Do you realize the races he's won? The Daytona 500 eluded him how many times? But Earnhardt was one of the best plate racers, and was taught by Buddy Baker and these people like that. Those guys were good at what they did. But these guys, they diluted the sport. Well, he has a better car. I remember my dad one time telling me, I was racing against Richie. I looked over there and I said, son of a bitch, he had like 4 sets of tires up there and everything else. Dad said, what's the matter? I said, look at that bastard. He got all those tires. Dad says, wool. How many tires you got on your car? 4. How many tires do you have on his car? 4. What's the problem? That's old racers. It's like Paxton and I were talking. Paxton, what the hell did you put them things on the side of the car for? They were nothing but heat grabbers and they never worked. But it was because we saw somebody else do it, so we would try it. That's where NASCAR lost their way. When Bill France died, they lost their way. They lost what they're supposed to be doing. And that's putting a show on for the people. They listened to the drivers. Denny Hamlin is the biggest goddamn whiny you'll ever meet in your life. And, come on. And, in all truthfulness, I'm not saying they're not a hell of a racer, but it's like I'm aggravated with football players because I played high school football. But you want another $25 million? And then you want me to buy your jersey and everything else, and then, oh, Jesus mighty, he hurt his finger. Oh, he's going to be out. I love Dick Buckus. We lost him. But that son of a bitch played football for one reason, to kill the quarterback. And that's what we watched it for. Okay? We watched racing because it was a matter of, oh boy, that guy's gone. You had a guy that won every week. There wouldn't be nobody in the grandstands. That's why you changed your stagger. You did anything you could in your power to try to beat that guy that was beating you. If he had a Firestone tire on and you had a Goodyear tire on, you would have said, I better try Firestones because they're winning. It was monkey see, monkey do. It was self-policing. The problem with NASCAR was I was doing stuff and I said to John Darby, we were in this meeting about all this stuff, and I said, you guys are letting them do too much stuff to these cars. I said, I know how to stop it. And the engineers go, you didn't even go to school for. I said, I'm smarter than any engineer here. They go, what the hell are you talking? I went for 6 years to MIT. I said, I don't give a shit where you went. I said, I learned about a Stanley tape measure a long time ago. I said, you can't outsmart a Stanley tape measure. And they looked at me, and Rusty Wallace said, God damn, Spence, you're right. I begged them to put rules in that plus or minus a quarter of an inch on the suspension. They would have not had these problems. If they would have stopped these cars from bottoming out looking like box cars going down the track, they could have stopped it 10 years ago before the old man died. But they didn't, because they all thought they were smarter than the engineers. I'm not saying I'm a smart guy, but I'm smart enough to say, wait a minute, we're losing people in the seats. We're losing our product. We're losing the excitement of being Kenny Wallace. We're not the water cooler talk anymore, Spence. You got a great point. Old Kenny was 100% right about that. When you're not talking about it on Monday morning, you're in trouble.
Jimmy, you're 30 years younger. Do you drive a NASCAR today? Is it an environment where you could thrive?
Oh, yeah. I think that. I remember I went to Darlington, and one of my heroes was Cale Yarborough. We were parked at the fourth turn, the original fourth turn at Darlington. Earnhardt mastered that track. And we were standing there, and he had Derek Coop driving his car. And Cale was up there watching, and you could see him. He's doing the old moves and stuff. I was standing there, and Travis said, Cale, come here. And he says, Cale, think you can still do it? He's like, I could beat 90% of them sons of bitches, and the other 10% would know I'm here. And the only thing about that is it's true to your mindset, but not your physical stamina. It's inevitable. You can still win races. You can still do good. But you got to know when it's time to say, you know what? It's time to move on. And I enjoy watching. I still watch NASCAR. And I love Kyle Larson. I think Kyle Larson's incredible. I like Tyler Reddick. Watch Jeff Gordon come up. It's fun. And there's a lot of guys. I love watching the race in January, Chili Bowl. That's always a good race. I never could fit in a midget, so I couldn't go to it.
No, you didn't fit my sprint car.
Oh, I know. I thought you were going to have to get a torch out to cut me out of it, Paxton. I still think we have a lot of young talent. I remember I was telling Barry when I went down to North Carolina with my dad. We did really good. We won 2 championships in a row. I had a lot of money. My car lot was making a lot of money. Our junkyard was doing really good. And my dad, I never called him my old man. My old man sat there and he goes, it's not too late to turn around. We'd drive another 30, 40 miles and he'd say, it's not too late to turn around. I had a U-Haul. I was taking all my stuff to North Carolina to live, 1988. I said, Dad, if I fail, I can always come back. Yeah, but you won't fail, he says. I know that. That's pretty cool.
Good stuff. Talking about young drivers, let's go back about 20 years. Bristol Motor Speedway and Kurt Busch.
I'll tell you a quick story about Kurt Busch.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there with old man Earnhardt one day at the driver's meeting. At the driver's meeting, when you would come through that door and somebody whistle or whatever, you respect, especially Earnhardt. You never mess with Richard Petty, Bobby Allison. When they called you to the office, you better come. I'm sitting there right by Earnhardt. Earnhardt always sat on the front corner. Kurt! Some bitch ignored him. Walked that way. Kurt! Now everybody sees it. Kurt, he comes over. Kurt sits down in front of Earnhardt. I'm sitting right there. You stick that finger up at me again, I will break it in both off and stick them up your ass. I'm like, oh. Earnhardt hated to be flared. Don't ever do that. And I went, Dale, what's that about? He goes, you know me, buddy. Take anything but a flare. He said, he flared me twice. He said, Jim, he's a hell of a race car driver, but he has no respect for anybody. That's the easiest way to explain it. Kurt said that I spun it out somewhere. Then it proceeded to go to Bristol. He knocked me up at Bristol, tried to wreck me. I says, well, Bobby Allison always taught me this needs to be addressed. And I said, well, I'll address it. We was in Indianapolis. I decided that he needed to meet the third turn barrier. And he did.
And it was smooth.
Oh yeah. Helton said, Spencer, that's as good as it gets. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, how the hell did you do that? Jim Hunter said, he was still living. He goes, Spencer, how did you do this? What are you guys talking about? Jimmy Johnson called me up after that wreck. He was having a problem with Kurt. Kurt was driving for Penske then at the time. Jimmy called me up one day. He goes, Spence, I want to talk to you. I said, okay. He goes, how do you spin somebody out like you did Kurt? And I says, well, I'll show you how to do it. I go to the track the next week, and I said, you know, Jimmy, I've been thinking about this. You don't need to go down that road. Hey, you're a 5-time champion. I said, he's an asshole. I said, don't go down to his level. Yeah, but he said, I want to take his ass out. And I said, well, he tried to take him out at Richmond. And I said, Jimmy, I says, what you did at Richmond, you can't mess with somebody at Richmond because there's too much brake on the car. You got to mess with somebody at a track. Once they lose a little control, they're history. You don't mess with them on a track where they got control of their car. Do it at Dover. You got to do it where it means something. When they hit the wall, it's like, man, that hurt. So I showed him how to do it. I mean, you got to make it look good. You got to stay up on his back bumper. And the minute you know he's in a lift, you don't lift, but you slam your brake on. I mean, that's happened in a split second. And that's what happened to Kurt. I said, okay, you're going to lift right about now. And I just pushed him that extra 5 feet. And I said, that son of a bitch going in the wall. But it didn't bother me. It didn't cost me a lot of money because they kicked me out. I can tell the story because it has to be told. We had a talk. Jack Roush was in there, the whole 9 yards. Helton says, I'm telling you two sons of bitches, this is over. If you do anything at all, the next time, one of you is going to be suspended. I don't want to do it, but I will. I says, I ain't got a problem. Well, in the meantime, Tony Stewart ran into it with him. Everybody had. He goes in the holler and Tony knocked him right in the end of the nose. Anyway, we go to Watkins Glen. Okay, everything's fine. The following week, go to Michigan. We're running in the top 5. He keeps trying to knock my fenders in. He says he ran out of gas. We had to pit for fuel. Michigan, you're coming in off the 4th turn, and there's a pit opening to come in after the race. All the haulers are lined up here, and I'm coming in, and here comes Kurt revving his motors up, and he pulls up in front of me to cut me off. It's okay. So he cuts me off. I pull in behind him. So he's pretending like his car's stalling. I almost bumped him a little bit. Damn it, Kurt, what the hell? And then the next thing you know, right in front of the hauler.
In front of your hauler.
In front of my hauler. He sees my 7 crew, the gas man, and he, waving, hey, here we are. Kurt slams his brakes on and stops. Well, I bumped him. I went, damn it. Yeah, we'll take care of it. So Kurt's there, and he goes, hey, you old bastard. I hear you right? So I went over there. I says, Kurt, get out of this car. I'm going to put one hand behind my back. That'll make it a fair fight. He goes, listen, you old son of a... I'm like, oh, man. So I walked close to the car, and he goes, I know where your family lives. That is the gospel truth as long as I live. I looked at him, and I said, no, you're not. And all I did was just... I didn't realize I hit him that hard. So I knew I was in trouble because the blood squirted. I said, oh... So he goes, you broke my goddamn nose. Yeah, I did. I hope I did. So we go into the hauler. I tried to sneak out. I knew I was in trouble.
You and Mike Davis.
Oh, Mike Davis.
He was driving, right?
Yeah,
you were laying across the back seat.
I says, Mike, he's waiting. I says, just get the hell out. Get us to the airport. I get on my airplane. I said, you got to get us to the air. He goes, oh, no, Jimmy. He said, these officials are looking for something. I said, yeah, me. So the officials are going down through their garage area looking at all the cars. I said, okay, Mike, drive us over to the... So we go over to the thing. And Tony Stewart was the one that told me, he says, called me up Monday. He said, don't say a word to anybody. I've been in this situation before. He says, don't say nothing. If anybody says anything, just say, hey, boy, it's a beautiful day today. Well, let's talk about Darlington or whatever, which is right. That's how you handle it. That's how I did handle it, and it helped me. But it didn't help Kurt. Made him bigger dummy than he was. So Helton calls me up. He says, what'd you do? I said, I only bitch slapped him. And Helton says, why? I explained to him why. Well, Mike Davis got the tape.
Yep.
Mike Davis got the tape where he said he was going to F up my family. He was going to do this and that. Afterwards, Mike suspends me from Bristol. Truck race Thursday night, the Busch race Friday night, and the Cup race Saturday night. It cost me about $100,000. Never forget as long as I live. Car owner pulled the truck out of the race. The Busch car finished in the top 5, and the Cup car finished in the top 5. And I felt like I could win. I was better than the guy that was in the car.
Yeah.
But anyway, I sat at home and said, this sport will go on without you. And it proved it. But he made me a hero.
Yeah.
He made me a hero because the people, where's Jimmy, had all these kind of shirts, Mongo, and the whole 9 yards. Kurt proceeded to spin out Sterling Marlin to win that race. I'm serious. People hate him. He is trying so hard. He called Mike Davis up to get on Earnhardt's show and all this, and Earnhardt says, Kurt, nobody likes you. He said, don't you understand that? And he's trying to become a TV analyst and stuff. Like he's a superstar. Like everybody forgot what he said. We were at Darlington. Them NASCAR officials are some of the best guys and the girls. They're fantastic. They do the job. You never would touch them. Kurt told them, he said, I want you guys to lick my sweaty privates. Man, why you don't do that stuff? That is fighting words, my friend. Yeah. And they were some military men. And one guy said to me, I said, why don't you whip his ass? He goes, Jimmy, but we can't because of who we are and what we do. So we just go on. But people don't forget those things. I mean, it was Earnhardt. It was Tony Stewart. Not just me. Go down the list of drivers he's had a run-in with and explain to me that he's right and they're all wrong.
Well, when I was doing my research, I punched into Google, Kurt Busch spins, and before I could get to Jimmy Spencer, it dropped down this entire list of names, and I went, wow, that's pretty extensive.
You know what's interesting, though? I'm doing TV. Jack Roush has got thousands of employees. Mark Martin calls me up. He says, Jack wants to talk to you at Darlington. I says, Jack really pissed me off up there at Michigan last week, Mark. Told me he got me arrested and everything else. I says, Jack, you got to listen to the story. And I says, he blew up. He told me, I says, Jack, I had the most respect for you ever. I said, I can't believe you just said that to me. I said, well, you can kiss my ass right now, Jack. I'm done with you. So in Michigan, I didn't know this. I could have been arrested. But I said I had witnesses and all that. So then afterwards, Jack pursued it. So the state troopers called me and I said, yes, I did hit him. But he swung at me. I moved, ducked. He did. How stupid are you? He's sitting in a race car and you're going to swing at you? That's stupid. That's how stupid he is. And he swings, and I'm like, whoa, what the hell? But anyway, so Jack comes to the hauler. Mark's there Friday night. He goes, I'm sorry. I says, Jack, I can't accept your apology. It really hurt me. I said, I had the most respect for you, Roger, all you guys. I said, that hurt. Well, I'm going to tell you something. To make a long story short, he explained the whole 9 yards to me about the fuel, everything. He heard the tape, everything else under the sun. And then it was actually going to resurge my career. He would call me, and I was doing TV, and that's when Kurt got in trouble with the cop at Phoenix. Messes up the county in Arizona. That guy he paints his jails pink. That guy is nobody to fool with him. Well, Kurt did something wrong. He disrespected the law. That's one thing Bill France would say. Never disrespect the military. Never disrespect the law. We can handle hell, Sterling Marlin got a ticket for 110 miles an hour, and Bill France got it taken care of like no tomorrow. If you respect the people, you're fine. That's the problem I had with Kurt. But anyway, so Jack called me up around 11:30 that night. My cell phone rings. I said, Jack Roush. Tells me the whole 9 yards. He said, I want you to drive Kurt's car tomorrow at Phoenix. I says, whoa, that's pretty cool, Jack. I says, yeah. I said, I think I can do that. So I'm starting to realize I don't have no helmet. I don't have nothing. And I said, I can't fit in this seat. So Jimmy Finning says, well, meet me at the track tomorrow and we'll figure something out. The Wood brothers did want to change the seat. I was going to use Michael Waltrip's seat. So I said, you know what? Jack says, listen, just drive it next week at Miami, the last race of the year, and we'll put Kenny Wallace in it there. Well, Kenny ran like shit in that car. He convinced the Rubbermaid people that he needed one more shot at it. I outran Kenny Wallace in Miami with a Don Arnold's car, God rest his soul, good man. He wanted me to drive his car, and I had called him up and told him what was happening. He says, that's fine, buddy. You drive that 97 car, you can win in that car. Kenny convinced him, and I said to my buddy TC, after the race was over, I says, here's my gloves, helmet, I'm done. Never driving another car again. I never did again. But Kurt did two good things for me, and one of them was made me a hero. The other one was, I finally said, it's time to hang it up. Your equipment ain't good enough.
The hero part, for those that didn't have a chance to hear this or see it, on television anywhere, but Mike Davis had gotten a hold of the in-car radio exchange where Kurt comes on and tells his crew, hey, I just tried to wreck him and I messed up. And Mike sent that to, I believe, Dave Despain.
He did.
And then after that, man, your popularity, you were just like Spencer for president.
I could do no wrong.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I think the biggest problem, I never lied. And to NASCAR, you needed an old man Earnhardt. He might have told the press something wrong, but when you were in that hauler with Bill France, you told him what happened. And if you kept your word with those guys, you never had nothing to worry about. And I was tired of watching these guys do stuff on the track. Oh, I blew a tire. Well, Jesus Christ, you could see you didn't blow a tire. Just watch the film. And I would tell Rick Miner, he says, Rick, he didn't blow no damn tire. I says, Teddy was our producer. He says, Teddy, roll that tape back. Look. He goes, damn, you're right. And I'd call him out. Then the next thing you know, they're all blaming me for their misfortunes. But the best one was, Tony Stewart calls me up. He goes, Spence, he says, I think I'm going to own my own team. And I said, Tony, if you put any money into this thing, you're stupid. He goes, well, I ain't got that kind of money. But he says, I've been offered a deal from Gene Haas. And I said, well, that'd be a good deal. So I said, what is it? He told me. I mean, give him a percentage, not drive the car, but you don't play the team. I said, that's a no-brainer. So Teddy goes, you got to explain that how you explained it in the meeting. I said, I'll explain it to the people. So I said, here you go. You got a man named Gene Haas. He owns 2 Cup cars. They run like crap. Now, they're Hendrick cars, Hendrick motors. He's went through 20 damn different crew chiefs. He went through everything under the sun except the 2 drivers. So I think it's time to get rid of the drivers. So Jeff Green comes on, cussing me and everything else. He wants to refire. He wants to have a recourse for me on the show. Confirm to the fans that he's a good driver. And I said, okay. Now I says, how many top 5s have you had? Oh, by the way, instead of top 5s, I says, how many top 10s have you had? He couldn't answer because he didn't have any. And I said, Jeff Green needs to be gone. One thing leads to another. He comes on the show the next week. Teddy goes, Jimmy, we're live. I says, I can handle it fantastically. Don't worry about it, Teddy. I'm not going to get you in trouble or anybody. So I'm looking in the camera, and Jeff's on, and he goes, you said some stuff to me last week, Jimmy, about this race team and me and everything else. And I said, yeah, Jeff, I did. I says, okay. I says, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, buddy. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, Monday, you're the boss of that team. What are you going to do? What's the first thing you're going to do? I mean, he don't know what he's going to do. Well, not because he needed to fire the driver. Johnny Roberts catches it real quick. And never again did he say anything. Well, Brian Vickers was another one. He was going to sue me because I said some stuff to him about he was going to win the race if Jimmy Johnson didn't run out of gas. If Jimmy Johnson didn't run out of gas, you weren't going to win that race. Anyway, he went on gas mileage, all kinds of stuff like that. But, it's one of them deals that I tried to bring the other side to the fans, and that's what the crying towel was for. The crying towel was intended, here you go, you need someone help. Cry in this towel because that's the only relief you're going to get from me.
Did you have a favorite crying towel moment? Because there were some classics.
God, that's a tough one.
I kind of like the Kevin Harvick. Who was he mixing it up with? And he left his helmet on. And you had said he's going to get in so much trouble with Delana. And then you made the comment that Delana would have taken her helmet off. And then that
was with Biffle.
Okay.
That dates back. Okay, I was driving the yellow freight car. That was in Richmond. No, I think it was Bristol. I think I finished second or third. And Harvick and Biffle were behind me. That's when he was driving for Childress. And freaking Harvick. Remember Greg Biffle gave me a black eye? Do you remember that? Yeah. That was great. That makeup artist did a fantastic job. Biff comes in and slides across the table. Because I can have fun with all those guys. The best fun I ever had was with Tony Stewart and Harvick. And they're there, and I go, you guys look like 2 banty roosters. I says, punch one another and make something happen. God dang, you guys are standing up, blah, 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 blah. The people want to see something. And he's just standing there, like Davis says, what the hell's a banty rooster? I says, I don't know. I said, he just looks like a banty rooster. The official says, Spencer, get the hell out of here. He says, no, Jesus, Smarty. I said, it's so exciting. I said, we need to see something. Harvick done that to Ricky Rudd. Now, Ricky Rudd's, you wouldn't want to fool around with Ricky. But Harvick done that to Ricky Rudd at Richmond. He was driving the 28 car. I remember Harvick sliding across the stunt guy. But the other one was Jack Sprague. We was at Bristol. Sunfish cost me the race. He was a lap car in the way. I have less than 3 laps to go. I got to just bump and move him up the racetrack. Right. He comes running down the pit wall. And I went, come on. I said, because he knows he can't come over here. He really didn't do nothing wrong. Well, then they called me in the hauler. And I said to him, I said, well, I wasn't going to punch him. I said, because he's too small. I said, that wouldn't be fair. I said, I was just going to talk to him about it, which I wouldn't, because it's not fair, to have a fight for no reason. Banty Rooster. I would have to say that one of my favorite, I remember I was doing a TV show, and oh my God, Teddy Lukitis, he loved me. He was a good guy. And he goes, Spence, he said, I'm waiting to get Harvick and Smoke on. I said, well, I'll take care of it. So we're at Pocono. And that was after Indianapolis when Tony won the race and Harper got together. And they were really good friends. And I was good friends with Harper. I was good friends with all of them. So Dave Burns is waiting there, and he's, I'm new to TV, and I come over, and the girl goes, hey, we're going to have him on at this time. I said, give me 5 minutes. Oh, yeah. He says, I'll be back. So Burns is waiting there with the mic. I got like 10 minutes, and we're going off the air because they were coming on the air at 5 after 1 or whatever it was for live. Okay. I said, oh, hell, I said, it's 10 up. We got plenty of time. So I says, Teddy, I won live. I says, Teddy, I got him. Come here. Harper comes over from my right, talking. And I see Tony coming. I go, Smoke, get your ass over here. So I put them together. We're talking. I says, explain to the fans out there. There's no hard feelings. What happened? It was racing. We cut. I got the mic, and them two sons of bitches pushed me over the guardrail on TV. The both of them. I was sitting there, and they pushed me over the... Teddy will always show that shot. So afterwards, Dave Burns comes over, and he says, you ever do that again, I'll have your job. Woo! I said, I'm scared. I said, let me tell you something, Burns. I said, when you can draw as many fans as we can on a Sunday morning, then you can tell me I can have my job. But I says, until you catch 2.5 million people watching this show, I ain't got nothing to worry about. And that's what the stories that did, because I was, and they would trust me. Roger Penske would tell me stuff. Richard Childress. You couldn't take it to the air. And Teddy would be upset. I knew that Kurt Busch was fired. And Teddy begged me 3 weeks earlier. He says, tell him. I said, Teddy, I cannot do that. I said, I cannot tell you that Kurt Busch is fired because I says, that was compass between me and Jack. And he said, I don't blame you. We knew what was going on in a lot of stuff, and they just wanted to vent themselves, but they wanted to trust you too. They had to be able to talk about their crew chiefs or whatever because they couldn't talk to nobody else because they could explain it to you.
There was the trust factor.
A lot of trust.
Yeah. I want to go back to your trips to Victory Lane. Talk about the win over Ernie Irvin at Daytona. Those last 5 laps or so, man, you were setting him up, checking your options?
Well, the cars were really equal. And all day long, I kept telling Junior, I said, Junior, I can't quite hold it wide open.
27 at this point.
Yeah, I was in the 27, and Ernie was in the 28. And I said, the only way you can hold it wide open is if you get in front of him. Because when I'm in front, I can hold it wide open. And Junior says, okay. He says, well, I'll take care of it. So the last pit stop, Junior says to Mike Hill, put a little more spoiler in it. Just put a little more spoiler in it so that'll not lift. So then I knew that I not lift. And then I was following him. I tried to figure out how to get by him. And we had mirrors. You could just see the guy's eyes in the mirror. When you watch these quarterbacks like Mahomes, it's incredible to watch the close-ups of the quarterbacks when they got their helmet there, but they're looking to the right. It's amazing, the perception. NASCAR's no different. You're looking in the car and you can see it, and you can see his eyes. So naturally you go radio silent the last few laps of the race. Every driver just wants to be quiet. You got to hit your marks, hit your marks. Yep. You don't need to tell me to hit my marks. I know what I got to do. Shut the hell up. And that's the biggest thing. They just kept watching him. I said, the only way I can get him, I got to somehow get along. So because you would block. Yep. And the blocks today, they don't respect the blocks. That's what causes the wrecks at Daytona and Talladega. I mean, they go to block. They just smash into one another, cause big wrecks. We didn't do it. We had a little bit of class. If you blocked, you said, okay, if I get alongside of him so he can't really block me anymore, then you got to respect the guy. And sometimes you eat the goose, sometimes the goose eats you. No, that's not how that goes.
That'll work for today.
Sometimes, how the hell does that work?
Sometimes you get you the bug.
Anyway, unfortunately for the bug, yeah. But anyway, so then once I said, you know what, if I could get the timing right, and I could get him in the corner where you can't be looking in your mirror, he'll lose me. Bam, I go down, and instead of going to the bottom of the racetrack with him, I shot that baby up to the top, holding it wide open, and I knew he was looking. I could see him look, and he's like, oh shit, so he had to get to the top. Once he got back, then I had that little bit of room to get alongside of him, and then the 2 cars came. It was awesome. But Ernie was a good friend. Ernie was a hell of a driver. He got hurt really bad twice. That's what took him out. Yeah. His head injuries.
That move there, you came down off of 2 and got under him. They had a huge run. But then you get beside him, getting into 3 and 4, and you guys are door to door off of 4. How in the world did you hold it down there?
Well,
you finally got under?
Give Ernie a lot of credit. We both could have wrecked. I talked to David Pearson, God rest his soul, I loved him to death. But he wrecked Petty in 1976. So I became good friends with them guys. Ernie could have done the same thing and turned me. Who would have won, who knows. But Ernie was racing for the championship. Ernie got hurt that year. Ernie got hurt at Michigan that year. And Ernie was leading the points. So I didn't know that at the time, but you got to think about it. And Larry McReynolds says, don't forget the big picture, don't forget the big picture. I remember Pearson and Petty. I thought David Pearson was one of the greatest drivers, if not the greatest driver of all time. because I remember Junior Johnson telling me the stories. David Pearson was the Silver Fox. I was driving to Talladega with Buddy Baker, and we're going through Atlanta my first year, and I says, Baker, I says, who's probably one of the best drivers you drove against? He says, I'll tell you what, buddy. He says, I'm going to tell you the best driver that I think ever lived. Your dad. He says, no. He says, I drive for Bud Moore. We were in Atlanta. I led the majority of the race. We come in, the second pit stop, come back out. I'm almost ready to lap Pearson. Never could lap him. Third pit stop, almost ready to lap Pearson. Never could lap him. Last pit stop, come out first. Who's second? Pearson. He goes, got the cigarette in his hand. He's waving to Buddy. Baker said he had a mind game like no tomorrow, and he proceeded to beat me. Pearson was special. But Pearson knew that the Hemis, they had an advantage over the Fords at the time. When Pearson passed Petty, he says, damn, I screwed up. Because he says, that son of a bitch ain't going to pass me till the last lap. The drivers know. That was like 12 laps to go. Think back to this race. Think back to Pearson telling you this story. So Pearson saying, I'm in trouble. So you're planning all along. And he said, I realized that he wasn't as good as I thought he was, but I knew what he was going to do. He was going to take a shot at getting underneath me. So when he got underneath me, he says, I knew that he had a lift. And he says, I kept giving him room. And he says, that son of a bitch wasn't lifting, Jimmy. And he says, he's going to wreck me. And he says, no, you're not. He turned into him, and he took Petty out. Petty got pushed across the line, and Pearson won the 500. That, to me, is priceless to hear David tell the story. He said, I knew I messed up. So many times you could hear, and I just screwed up. And you remember those things. I remember Richard Petty saying, never forgot the ones that I should have won. Those are the ones that bother you. They were great guys. Bobby, oh, man, these guys, incredible.
And that was half a car length win there?
For me with Ernie, oh, it was close.
If that.
Yeah. You see it today where there's a couple only. The cars are so competitive, so equal. It was a few inches. I didn't know one. I mean, he didn't either. He congratulated me afterwards, but yeah, we bumped a couple times, but you tried to side draft, and what he was trying to do is he kept pushing against me, trying to slow me down, and I would keep turning off, trying to break off, because I knew it was going to come down to just close.
If you're going to win your first one, that's the way to do it.
It was awesome. I should have won a lot more, but we were rocking him. I said, Peter Guy was building the motors. Robert Yates came. He's dead and gone, but he would always look at the cars, and he looked at the motor, and he said to Donnie, he says, them Gator belts, them Goodyear belts are going to turn in the race. I'm going to send you down and set the Daco belts. I've had them turn on the dyno. They would run those motors for 500 miles on an endurance test on the dyno. Robert Yates would. 500 miles on the dyno to know it, then it would break. I was a rockin'. I was leading the damn race. Earnhardt ended up winning it. He ended up passing Rick Mast. The goddamn thing ran hot. Turned the fan belt. Cooked the motor. And another time, I loved him to death. He's no longer with us. Harold Elliott was Rusty Wallace's engine builder. Harold Elliott worked for us, and he built the motor at Bristol. He said to me, he says, no idea why Travis has a spare throttle linkage in that toolbox. And he tried to get Travis to put on a 1/4-inch Hyman, but it was actually like a 1/2-inch aluminum, I guess you would call it hexagon, T6.
Okay.
On the throttle linkage. I was practicing Saturday afternoon before the race, and Harry Gant come over, and I told Travis, I says, Travis, I just don't like the way it's coming off before. And Harry come over, and he says, listen, that car's good enough to win this race, Jimmy. I said, I told Harry what I'm doing. Harry says, Travis, do what you used to do to me. Travis went to that truck, got a Carrera shock. Everybody's got Bill Steve, and he says, go try that. He tried it. I said, wow, that thing fixed it. Ran 5 laps, I pulled in. I says, Travis, I don't know what the hell you done. I said, that fixed it. Led 200 and I don't know how many laps. Getting ready to lap Kawicki, 5th place. He says, you need to slow down. I says, Travis, I did. And he goes, okay, well, if you did to keep doing what you're doing, I was running 2/10 quicker a lap than anybody on the track. The car was incredible. Same car I won with Junior. It was a banjo front steer, rear steer, front clip with a front steer. It was incredible. Incredible car. I would go through the corners, and I was explaining to Barry Kleindance. I said the car would never, the camber wouldn't change in the caster. You know, there a caster gain or nothing. So whatever you had, it was going to stay. And once you adjusted the car, the fuel, no matter what, it would stay the same. It was incredible. We made a pit stop and come back out on the pits leading the race. And I says, Travis, I says, the gas pedal just went to the floor. Travis Carter was never one to curse. And he says, don't you F with me, Jimmy. I says, Travis, I'm telling you, that's what's wrong with it. The throttle linkage broke. That was the biggest heartbreak I had. I wanted to win Bristol, so I won a couple times in the Busch car. I never won in the Cup. Kurt cost me the one with the 41. 7 car, Tommy Baldwin ran me out of gas, which just racing. Dick Moroso's car. Oh, did we have a car that night? In fact, Robert Yates bought the car from Dick Moroso the following week. High man broke. Today, the NASCAR engine builders, they don't break. The technology, the sport has progressed so long, even in the sprint cars, dirt late, anything, they don't break. The guys have gotten so smart. We don't have no bearing failures anymore. We don't have hardly any piston failures, valve, nothing. I mean, when they adjust the valves now, they don't adjust them. They put shims underneath the push rod and the rocker arm, so there's no nuts and bolts to break. I lost so many modified races when I was telling Barry with Hutter, you used to loosen the poly lock and you tighten it down. If you tighten it down too much, it would crack. I remember I was at Richmond. Man, that car was fast. I practiced. You always would be there early. And I said to the kid, I said to Tommy, I said, what is he doing? Tripp said that he had the push rod wasn't lined up to the rocker arm. And it slipped out. I said, the motor's going to blow up and bent the valve. They said, you're not a motor builder. I said, I'm telling you right now that I know what I'm talking about. That push rod cocked that rocker arm and it bent the valve. Well, for 7 hours, they kept convincing me there was nothing going to happen. Well, guess who was leading the goddamn race? With 100 and some laps to go and the motor blowed up. Me. And then they wanted to talk to me. I said, you can all kiss my fat ass. And I walked out. And I mean, you don't forget. I was going to win. I had just won this third race in a row at freaking Richmond in the Busch Series. I loved it. They said, well, how'd you know it was going to happen, motor builder? I said, I'll tell you how I know what happened. About 10 years ago, we were at Oswego, New York. And my brother Ed was adjusting the valves. And I watched him, this thing slipped. And Bobby Jacoby said, that wasn't good. So Hutter comes and Hutter changes it. I says, and Hutter said it might have bent the valve. I said, well, let's change the motor. I said, we got another one in there. No, he said it'll be okay. Guess who was leading that race? And the motor blew up. Well, it broke the rocker arm with about 10 laps to go. Me. And I ended up finishing second because of it. You don't forget the ones you lose. Just the way it is.
Let me go one more question, and then we'll wrap things up. We'll have a couple questions from the crowd before we let you go here. But, we talked a little bit about the technical end of NASCAR and big league racing. How much cheating goes on? I heard Dale Jr. say on one occasion, he said, I don't think I've ever driven a legal car.
He exaggerates for publicity.
All right, fair enough.
I'm serious. I do not believe that there's a lot of cheating going on in NASCAR. I believe there was years ago. I think in the last 20 years there isn't. I remember when Junior Johnson would go to Wilkesboro, and you always wonder why Terry Labonte, whoever drove Junior's car at Wilkesboro, won. I saw the wheels at his shop. So what they did is they melted lead on the inside of the wheel around the interior of the wheel. Okay. Then they would mount 2 tires. Well, the first couple of times they let them get away with both tire changes. But then they come down and said, something's fishy. They went on it. So then they got down to 1. It was 130 pounds of lead on that freaking wheel. And Shorty Edwards, they pushed the car through tech, get it weighed. They would say, shit, we got a leak in that tire. Well, NASCAR, well, you can change the tire. And NASCAR never was smart enough to check it. And they would roll that tire back and take 2 men in a truck to lift that damn thing up. And they proceeded to go on and win the race. Well, they're 120 pounds lighter. This is the cheating that was funny. They had a guy named Bud Green, weighed about 130 pounds, 135 pounds, short, hell of a farmer. He was Junior's main hog man. He would take care of the cattle and everything else. Now, Bud was a pretty short guy. And freaking Tim Brewer would slide that son of a bitch in the trunk of the car. They would lift the trunk up, they'd roll his ass in the damn trunk of the car. He would roll out of the car, and they'd hurry to put a hanky on his thing. Somebody said that. You need to watch that. So Dick Beatty, God rest his soul, they was at Wilkesboro or somewhere, and they're rolling the car around the back. And Dick's over there by the ambulance, and he's standing there, and he's watching. And he goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they go by the ambulance, and he goes, 1, 2, 6. Okay. He comes over, stop. He goes, now boys, there was 5 U's when you come around that ambulance. Now there's 6. And Brewer, Dick, you need a goddamn pair of glasses. Dick says, you might be goddamn right, but right now you're gonna goddamn pull that car in and reweigh it. They reweighed it. It was 135 pounds light. And Dick Beatty goes to Brewer, you ever do that to me again? You're gone. That was the stuff, they used to put wax when they P&G'd the motors. They don't do that stuff anymore. They used to cheat on the bodies a lot. Cheaters get caught one way or the other. I won't deny it. We were at Daytona, and I was driving my own car. And David McKay, he was a pretty smart guy, and he raised bull semen. And he would freeze it in liquid nitrogen. So we're sitting there one day, and he goes, got me an idea. He says, I believe I could freeze 2 of those shocks to hold that car up an inch. And when it thaws out, it'll drop an inch. I says, Richard, if you can do that, I kick their ass. He said, okay, well, we'll try it. So they played with it for about 2 weeks in that garage. They finally figured it out. So NASCAR caught it. Okay, we knew that the car had to be 38 inches or whatever the height of the quarter panel was, 34 and a half, whatever it was, on the right rear quarter panel. And then you had 1 inch difference. And the right rear was high. We would never want to be high because it's a disadvantage. So they're rolling that car through tech, and Billy Kerwood said that comes over and he goes, Billy, your car's like an A316 high. Billy says, oh, Jesus Christ. He says, you know, Jimmy, if I touch a jack bolt on this car, he'll fucking fire me. So the official says, well, I think you should lower it. He says, no. He says, he told me do not touch that car. He says, well, I'm just telling you, you got a disadvantage. I didn't know what happened. You know, we're going through driver intros, and I come walking over, and they're sitting there, and I keep staring at the car. I'm like, okay, what do you think? David says, I might have left him in a little too long. I said, okay, what can I expect? He says, oh, boy. He says, well, they won't break, but he says, oh, you're going to have a hell of a chop to it, you know. All right. So I decided that I could wreck. It's bouncing. And I went, oh, boy. So I said, better go to the rear of the field. So I went to the last place. I kept trying. I said, boy, I hope the heat heated up. And luck would have it, they had us go 1 more pace lap, and we got it. And they said, oh, they're fine now. But I went to the lead, and I was going to win that race, and my T&L motor blowed up. So there you go. And that car was so fast. And then we went to Daytona. Illegal as could be. I was 100% legal because my mom always said if you cheat, you get caught somehow. And that was the truth. That was a good example. When we cheated that car, we didn't win. But anyway, so we went through tech, everything. The car is so fast. I spent a lot of money. Newly put the body on, the whole 9 yards. We're leading the race at Daytona. I come on the radio, and they said there was a caution with like 55 laps to go or whatever. And I said to the crew, they said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I don't want to pit if we don't have to. I said, okay, if we pit, can we make it to the end of the race? And they said, no, you can't. I said, we got to pit again no matter what. They said, yeah. I said, we don't need tires. I said, why get back like Bobby Allison taught me? Why get back in the rattlesnake pit? So I stayed out front leading the race. Well, I led the race all the way up to 91 laps. It was a 120 lap race. Well, they had to start pitting around lap 105 to 110. I waited as long as I could, and I came down pit road. I know I was running 10 mile an hour slower than I was supposed to. I had that thing, I was the only car on pit road, and I'm coming down pit road in first gear at 4,700 RPMs, and it was supposed to be 5,700. I'm watching the thing I pulled in, no tires, fuel only, because you never wear tires out at Daytona. Come back out on the pit road, come back out on the track, and they said, post the car, speeding. So I wasn't. Gary Nelson was up in the booth, and he goes, Les, he wasn't speeding. David Hoots said he wasn't speeding, Les. The girl that I knew said, they both said the same thing. But Les said you were speeding. And he says, I said post the car. This is what was wrong with NASCAR to a certain point. That was his vendetta to get me. If he posts the car, I have to come down pit road. I come right out behind Dale Jarrett and Grissom. And Bechtel Corporation owned Grissom's car. And one of Jarrett's people come down and say, hey, if you protect us, we'll get you a set of tires. Well, Buddy Parrott come down, and Buddy says, give me them radios. So Buddy Parrott puts the radios on. He goes, Jimmy. I said, yeah, who's this? He says, this is BP. What do you want, buddy? He said, make sure you push us to victory. You gonna take care of me? Don't you worry about it. So I knew then I was in good shape. So it was a lot more than a set of tires. So I says, tell Steve to get behind me. We'll pass Jarrett with 5 laps to go. So now, here comes know-it-all Les Richter on the radio. They could scan every one of us. Mr. Spencer, I don't believe you need to be in that field of cars, the 3 cars. And I went, I can't hear you. You got bad communication. He goes, I don't believe you need to be in that field of cars. And the race is winding down. And I said to Grissom, let's go. And I said on the radio, I take the lead, Grissom second, Jarrett's third. Because Jarrett, we're going down the straightaway, Jarrett's going. He knew. So we come in, I says, now listen to the spotter. I says, you tell Steve, we're going down the back straightaway. I'm going to go to the high side, go on and win the race. And he did. I went in the next day at the Daytona 500, and I was bitching to Bill about it, and Bill says, well, we can get to the bottom of it. So we go in there, Les comes in, and he says, yeah, I posted your ass. He's like, I told you I was going to get you for what you said at Bristol. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, he's like, told you. We hold the black flag. It cost me the Daytona Goodies 300. Never forgot it, and he wondered why I couldn't stand that son of a bitch. And I told him I could never whip his ass because he was a professional football player. You'd have got your ass stomped. Yeah. But they knew how to get back at you. They would say there's foam rubber coming out of a car, debris on the track. Denny Hamlin always complains about that. You know, so many stories you hear about put it out. I remember Bill France would say, put it out because you'd rather err on the side of caution than not. You know, now they don't even put a caution flag out. And to me, I think that's a mistake.
Well, great insights. We certainly appreciate that, Jimmy. Thank you for everything. We have a little bit of time here. Let's see if anyone has any questions for Jimmy.
What the hell would you bring that up for? Well, I'll explain it to you. I had the 70th year of Snap-on tools on my truck. That was the 10th anniversary of the Craftsman Truck Series. Who would you want to win the race? Anyway, NASCAR has a line that you go back to that line when the caution comes out. Not the line that's there, the last line at the caution light. Plus they have a timer. They have a timer stamp. When that caution comes out, that timer stamps that caution. You can't lie. When that caution come out, I went by the start-finish line under white flag, and then down the straightaway, the caution came out. So I had already locked myself in. They went to the fourth turn camera to get the angle this way of Bobby Hamilton passing me, congratulating me that I won the race. And they said he won the race. So I pulled into victory lane because they said you won the race, which I did win the race. And somebody made a decision that I didn't win the race. I don't think it would have been too bright for Craftsman to have a Snap-on truck win the race. Plus, they had a good excuse. You know, I sat in there and I says, first time ever I was backed out of victory lane. And Helton said to me, thanks for doing that afterwards. And I said, well, I'm getting paid by TV and stuff, and I know that if I would have done that, they could have fired me for what I was going to say. But I said, you know what? You guys have effed me my whole life, and you wonder why I've got a chip on my shoulder for it? That's the reason. I said, Mike, show me the timestamp. They still, to this day, won't show you the timestamp of the caution and the position. Rest my case. But hey, you know what? Bobby Hamilton, God rest his soul, he's in the hand of the good Lord. So he won the race.
Another question for Jimmy. Yes, sir.
Jimmy, the minute you crashed,
with Wally Dolly.
What did Wally
Dolly.
window net say to you?
He wouldn't put it down. He was driving for Bud Moore. I was running third spot, and that dumbass wrecked me, and he was 5 laps down. I was just mad. You know what's funny? That Peterson guy that grabbed me on the back, I threw him off, you know, and I was going to drop him, and then I realized, you know, he was watching Daytona 500 and died in his lounge chair. He was a good guy. All the officials, I had the utmost respect for him. You never would fight with an official. But Wally, he knew I was pretty mad. I remember when Michael Waltrip done that to Lake Speed. Yeah, you know you're going to hurt yourself, but Paxton, how many times have you lost a race?
A lot of them.
That's what I'm getting at. No, but that's what I'm getting at. You're so, how did that get away? And you're just so tensed up. Yeah, you gave it, you're like, what the heck, and you're just so aggravated. And you're aggravated for not having a good finish. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, wow. Bristol, I remember Bristol one time. I was driving for Dick Moroso. There was 12 laps to go. Morgan Shepherd wrecked me. He didn't intentionally do it. It was just that he was out of and I'm like, God dang, Morgan, what the heck? Just slow the hell down. He wrecked me. I went to the car, give him peace of my mind. And he was in there, I think I broke my shoulder, and looking for mercy. I said, you listen, you old son. You're going to pay for this dearly. You just cost me Bristol with 7 or 8 laps to go in the race. The next day, the both Wood brothers, the Woodsies, I call them. They come over. I was driving Moroso's cup car. They come over and they said, Mr. Excitement, will you do us a favor? I said, boys, I'm not messing with your car. I got too much respect for you guys. You got my word. But if he messes with me tonight, I'll park his ass in the 5th bleacher. And they said, he will not do that. He's more concerned about what you're going to do. And I said, no, I'm not. And I outran him anyway. But you just had respect for one another.
For the folks in the back, on or off the track, if there's one event you could change, what would that be?
Hell out of
Probably not having the jack break at Pocono when I was driving for Bobby Allison. We were going to win that race, and the jack broke on the last pit stop. That haunted me. The Mattiolis were fantastic. I love Pocono. We were talking about I was there. I was at Pocono, and Mark Donahue was one of my heroes. Won his first IndyCar race there. Mario. I wanted to drive Indy cars. Pocono was a special place. I went to Poconos, and I'm saying, all right, I think I can get into pits. So as they were pushing the Indy cars in, I just put a rag in my back pocket. And I pushed the car in with them, and I'm over there, and God dang, I wanted to meet A.J. Foyt. He had the black number 14. He always was in the front pit row. And I said, well, hell, I'll just go in there and check it out. And I'm over there, and I'm looking at the car. He comes over, and he bumps me. I go, oh, what's up, buddy? Holy shit, A.J. He says, what are you doing there, buddy? I said, man, these cars intrigue me. I love Indy cars. I'm racing a little bit of dirt cars, but I love to run Indy cars. He goes, really? And I said, yeah. I said, they're pretty cool. And I got to meet him. He said, well, keep it up. You know, you're going the right route. And me and Paxton talked about that, about going the dirt route, then going asphalt. Because I first started dirt. And you look at Tony Stewart, you look at Jeff Gordon, you look at these guys that came from dirt to asphalt, they have better car control. And that means a lot. But Pocono was pretty special. I never had I won Pocono in the modifieds, but I never had the luck I needed in the Cup car there. It would be pretty cool if I'd have won it.
Jimmy, you said you love Indy cars. Didn't you and Chip Ganassi have a bet?
Yeah. Chip bet me $100 I couldn't fit in the Indy car.
And he won.
And no, I fit in it. I tested it. Kenny Brack was driving it, and we went down for a target shoot, and the guy still is crew chief for Scott Dixon now. And Chip goes, did this fat ass fit in that car? And the guy goes, yeah. He says, okay, now I have to let him on the track. Cart said that I could go on the track, and Kenny Brack told me what I had to do. You know, I said, I don't want to wreck the car because they're very easy to wreck. You actually felt the downforce about 70, 80 mile an hour. And he told me where to go. So I got in the car. They had made all the adjustments. Bill France sent me a picture. Oh, man, it was funny. I had a lot of publicity at that one. But I actually drove the Indy car at Sebring in Florida, and I got it up to where I was 3.5 seconds slower than they were. Tony Glover comes over and he goes, Spence, what adjustments do we need to make? And I knew he was having fun. And I says, take this helmet, put it in there, and put another helmet on somebody that knows what the hell they're doing. Because I knew that it's not the car, it's the driver. But I says, Tony, how much time do I have to make up? He goes, I think 3.9 seconds. I says, 3900ths of a second, I can make that up. He says, no, 3.9 seconds. I said, I don't think I can make that up. Jimmy Johnson found that out. There's a lot to those Indy cars. There's a lot to a sprint car. I mean, you just get in there and you turn it and you hold the son of a bitch wide open. No, I drove a sprint car one time. There's a lot to them. They're more than people realize. You just don't set them in there and hold them wide open and go around the racetrack. You better know what you're doing.
Now, we're going to have Spencer back, and the next time we're going to take the...
We got time for 2 more questions. If given the opportunity, would you accept an offer to run the SRX Tour?
I had an offer. No, I don't want to do it. Last time I drove a car was in Canada, finished third, and if I would have listened to the damn crew chief, I probably would have won. Hard-headed me.
You're not supposed to listen to the crew chief, you said.
No, I didn't say that. I said when the crew chief tells you how to drive the car. When you tell the crew chief what to do, that's time for you to quit.
All right.
No, I wouldn't drive the SRX because I think that I'd have to lose 40 pounds maybe, and I just don't want my grandchildren to have those memories. I think there's a lot better things to do than race. If you want to race local and enjoy it, that's fine. But if you want to go cup racing, you're going to have to mortgage your house, your mom and dad's house, your grandfather and your grandmother's house, and then you're going to have to tell them you'll do anything you can for the next 10 years to pay for it. Because what has happened to the NASCAR sport, I got in on talent. Dale Earnhardt got in on talent. And Rusty Wallace. And you can go down a list of drivers. You got the phone call because you could do it. Today, it's not how good you are. It's how damn much money can you bring me. And that sucks. Because there's so many talented drivers out there that will not ever get a shot. There's some people out there driving that they cannot ever be as good as some of the guys that are out there. They're not going to get the breaks, unfortunately.
All right, final question, Jeff.
For the same rate.
I kicked his ass. First year racing at Port Royal. I was leading the race. I didn't win. I was going for my first ever win. I think he needed 5 feet, and I left 4 feet 8 inches. And
He moved you over.
He moved me over. And I said, son of a bitch, Dad. And he ended up beating me. I got second. This is like my 5th or 6th race of the year. Now, I had a good car because my old man could set the cars up. And it was a Barry Kleindance car. I proceeded to ignore him. I wouldn't talk to him for about 3 or 4 weeks. Mom said, this got to stop. We were eating supper one night. She said, this has got to stop. I said, you son of a bitch, Dad, why did you do that to me? And he goes, I didn't do nothing anybody else wouldn't do. He goes, how much room did you leave me? And I said, you're right. I left you too much room. He said, you just drove in a little too far. You got the car tailing in the middle of 1 and 2, and he got up underneath me. I did race against him. I did win my first race against him, that Jimmy Nave deal. I knew it was time to move on. I didn't want to race against my dad, and he didn't want me to do what he did for 25 or 30 years. But I remember one time he wanted to run a modified. Tim Richmond was one of the best drivers you can't imagine. The promoter at Shangri-La, the promoter says to me, he says, I know you bring 2 cars to the track, I want to run a car for Tim Richmond. So I said, okay, made a deal with him. And Tim Richmond comes in, both cars are sitting there. And my brother Eddie, Tim goes, what's that car? And he says, well, the last time he was out with that car, I think he won at Thompson. And he goes, what about that car? He says, he won with this car last week. He goes, that's the one I want. Okay. I gave that car to Tim. And talking about a driver knowing more than a crew chief. So we go out and we're racing. Tim kept telling me, he says, you need to free that car up. And Ed says, Tim, you don't need no more stagger. He goes, give me a 1/4 inch more stagger. And he says, Jimmy will kick your ass if he'll give you a 1/4 inch more stagger. He said, I can hang on to it. So it was a 50-lap race. Tim got out in front of me. We had good cars. Tim got ahead of me on the one restart, and he takes the lead. I said, it's going to be hard to beat him. And all at once, I'm watching a Goodyear tire on the asphalt. We would wafer the inside edges, the outside edges. We had too much stagger. And I had open face. Somehow I could see it, and I saw I got him now. And sure enough, I bumped him a little bit. My own car, and I ended up passing him and beating him. So the following week, my dad says, you can't do that to me. So I said, Dad, you could drive that car. So Dad drives it. He starts in the back. We're out there racing. It was a 100-lapper, I think. Now, my dad was up in age then. He pulls in the pits. Ed says, Dad, what the hell did you pull in for? He said, I got a bad vibration. There's a bad vibration in it. After the race was over, I ended up winning the race. I said, Dad, what happened? He says, I wasn't going to let you lap me. You think I'm stupid? Oh, my daddy. Oh, they all liked my dad. My dad was a character. He was a good man.
Classic.
My dad drove sprint cars. They weren't sprint cars, Lynn. What the hell were they called?
They were super modified.
Super mods. And, but anyway, so my dad was back in the 60s. I would have been 1961, 62. I think my sister was born in 61. My dad was driving for like you were. Who was the guy that drove your cars?
Emmerich.
Mr. Emmerich. Had a lot of money, and he wanted his cars to look nice. Well, Dad drove for 2 brothers up near Pittston, Pennsylvania, that had coupes that they were winning all the. My dad won lots of races for them. They had 2 full-time mechanics, Paxton. 2 full-time mechanics working on my dad's car. So they said, Dad, we want to go to Indy. And Dad says, yeah, I'll go to Indy. They go to Indy, and he takes all the tests that he's supposed to and everything. And I guess it was about 61 or 62 that killed a bunch of guys, which is normal. Dad sat there, and the next day he was supposed to go on the track. The Chevy dealer said, Ed, what do you think? And he goes, man, guys, he said, I think I can do it. In fact, I know I can do it. But I got Fran at home with 7 kids, and I got a big business, and if something happens to me, who's going to run it? That right there stopped my dad from going IndyCar racing because of what happened. He was always so supportive of me in my NASCAR Cup Series because I know my dad could have made it. A lot of these guys are in. I know these guys could have run. Richie Evans, I guarantee you Paxton. We saw Dave Blaney. There's so many guys that could have ran the Cup Series, but the problem was they weren't making no more money than you guys were making in the days. They weren't making as much, Paxton. You're 100% right. You could make more money. I remember Richie Evans telling me that he made more money than they won in the Cup races. The only thing that made the Cup Series more popular was if you look back at the 60s, the Cup race, you were lucky to get $400 to start a race. And you only won 10 or 15,000. And I remember winning some modified races in the 80s that paid 15, 18,000 to win 100-lap, 200-lap races. And now they're not even paying 3,000 or 4,000. But to to me, it was a big disparity, and I think there were so many good racers in the 60s and 70s that didn't race, and then you had to go up against Richard Petty, who was backed by Chrysler, Plymouth, Dodge. I mean, that's what made Holman Moody what they were. Holman Moody could beat the Pettys, especially with Pearson. So I remember Junior Johnson telling me that if Bobby Allison would have stayed with me in 1972, Richard Petty would not have 7 championships. But Bobby Allison, I love him to death, he wanted half the damn sponsorship money from Coca-Cola. Junior told me that story in his own mouth, and Bobby didn't do it. But you look at who won all his... Cale won a championship. Darrell Waltrip, Bill Elliott. You go down the people that won championships for Junior. He was pretty special. But those guys, Bud Moore, they had cliques. The Wood brothers, but they all knew they needed money to race. That's how they survived, and it was all sponsorship money, really. It wasn't the winnings.
So how does a driver come up with their number? In your family, you had the 24 for years, you and your dad.
You know, my dad come up with 24. I wanted 24, and they wouldn't take it. Then they gave it to Jeff Gordon. My dad used to own a gas station, and at the time, gas was mostly 16, 17, 18 cents a gallon. He never was over 20 cents, and it was never under 15 cents, and that's why we used the 2 and 4. That's the truth. And there's a lady, somebody has a picture from Langhorne, and there's a white 24. Those are gas station numbers on my dad's car, 24. That's gas station numbers, and that's how we got 24. And you look through my whole career, I was 24, 24 junior.
That's beautiful.
That's how you had it. Amazing.
Perfect sense.
How did you get 1, Paxton?
Easiest to paint.
You asked.
I know. It's Paxton.
Yeah.
Why 1 and 1A? Well, 1A was for Allen?
Alan, yeah.
Allen, and then 1 was for Paxton.
Well, we started with 1 and 3, so that's how we first started. We had a number 1, and Alan didn't like that. So then we got a 1A and 3, because Opperman to drive the
Hippie. Wow. That's how most of the guys took the numbers, the owners. Junior Johnson, 11, was the number, baby. That was it. And Earnhardt always told me that he wanted the 3 because Childress got the 3, but he said that 2, when he won his first races and all that in, 3 was always better than number 2 because it was always 1 better. and Earnhardt had that slanted 3. I mean, it was just, that was a hell of a marriage, him and Childress. Good people.
Well, that's a great way to end the day. Well, we appreciate everybody coming out today. Jimmy, it has been an incredible day. Thank you so much. Nice round of applause once again for Jimmy Spencer.
We hope you enjoyed this journey through racing history and the personal stories that keep the spirit of motorsports alive. The Eastern Museum of Motor Racing is a premier destination for motor racing enthusiasts, showcasing a vast collection of historic racing cars, artifacts, and memorabilia. To learn more about the EMMR or to be a part of the next in-person Racers Roundtable, you can plan your visit or support the museum's mission to preserve and celebrate the legacy of racing by heading to www.emmr.org. Follow them on social media for the latest news, upcoming events, and exclusive content. Until next time, keep the engines running and the memories alive.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.